Pawn shop fails. The wildest get-rich-quick schemes we've seen. I'm a pawnbroker. Somebody brought in their dead grandmother's gold tooth, plucked from her ashes, with the tooth still in it. We told her that the tooth had to be separated from the gold for us to weigh it. They desecrated their loved one's remains for less than $2. Comic book shop employee. Let me tell you, every single seller has a, quote, totally mint collection, and a first appearance of Superman or Batman. There have been literally hundreds of Batman or Superman #1s printed over the years. Every time they reboot a series, it starts with issue #1. The people who were polite about it, I didn't mind. The people who thought we were trying to rip them off and that their books were priceless just did my head in. This is especially dumb considering that Batman and Superman's actual first appearances were in comics that didn't even have Batman or Superman in the title. If it was the Hulk, at least his first comic actually was The Incredible Hulk #1. A guy literally brought in an RPG. He was doing yard work for this old lady whose husband had passed. She gave it to him for doing some yard work, not realizing it was live and active. The guy was career military, and after the bomb squad came and disabled it, they went to their house and found a trove of similarly very illegal military-grade weapons. Oh, you mean that kind of RPG? What's funny is that this sounds exactly like a role-playing game quest. You did some lawn work, probably killed some low-level mobs, all for an old lady. Thank you, adventurer. Here's a fully functional weapon I have lying around. A kid from my school had a letter signed by Abraham Lincoln. He brought it to show and tell one day, and we were all super impressed. In grade 12, he stole it from his dad and went to pawn it. He bragged about how he was going to be rich. It turned out his grandfather forged the letter and gave it to his dad as a gift. I had a guy try to get $100 for 2 wheat pennies and 2 buffalo nickels, 4-legged. About 14 years ago, I had a guy call the store and ask if we took GPSs. I told him we did, and then he asked the address to the store, and I told him. Then he asked me how to get there. Haha, well, in 2011, that certainly wouldn't be a ringing endorsement of the main way people got around. I was about to ask why you'd even bother stocking GPSs, but then I remembered that thin stretch of time where most people I knew had a TomTom or some such device, before we worked out that we had a machine in our pockets that could do the same thing without buying additional hardware. What did you want him to do? Take the GPS out of its original packaging and slash its value by over 90%? No GPS collector would be that foolish. Had a guy try selling me a firearm. Before I could even nope him out of there, the shop was in New Jersey, we don't buy those, he began to point the weapon around him with people all over the store pulling the trigger. That guy was a special kind of guy. Fortunately, it wasn't loaded, but still. I don't work in a pawn shop, but I bought my first guitar in one. The big defense contractor in my town laid off over 10,000 people overnight, and the contagion spread. I was looking for my first guitar, and I'm cheap. After checking the music stores, I hit up the pawn shops near work. While I was looking, this clean-cut guy in his early 30s comes in trying to pawn his guitar, hard case, and effects. Since the shop had a bunch, they offered him crap, evidently, and he left. He was almost crying, saying he got laid off and had to pay some bills. I followed him out and asked him what he wanted for it. He said $100. I also gave him my phone number and said he could buy it back when he got on his feet. I never heard from him. I'm looking at it now. Unplayed for months. I hope everything worked out for him. I worked in a pawn shop for around 7 years or so. We had people trying to pawn fake jewelry all the time. The best was when they didn't know it was fake. So many women left yelling about that cheap son of a bee. I can't even remember half the stupid crap we turned away. There was one thing that we didn't turn away, and we should have though, and I love that story. You see, one of the other employees took in what he described as a 24-karat gold baby bracelet. It was a ring for a gentleman's downstairs. A golden rooster ring, if you will. This employee was a bit of a know-it-all, and he liked to rub other people's mistakes in their faces. He eventually went on to become manager, and then district manager, and you can bet your sweet keister I made sure every employee under him knew about the baby bracelet. He never lived that down. Not a pawn shop, but GameStop. Guy rolled in with hundreds of bootleg games and a bunch of modded consoles. He couldn't fathom why I wouldn't take them. I used to work at one, and back when they took DVDs, that was a constant issue. People trying to sell us DVDs they burned off their computer and getting mad when we wouldn't take them. A penny that was dated 2009. You gotta offer them $5 on store credit and sell them something for $25 that they wouldn't have bought anyways, and then you still made $10. We had a smackhead try to sell us a quarter. He wanted $60 for it, with 2001 on it. His logic was because of September 11th, it made the quarter a whole lot more valuable. I worked in a jewelry store during the peak of the "everybody buy gold and diamonds" phase. A group of kids comes in with a ring that they found in the parking lot. It's an obvious cubic zirconium, which I tell the ringleader. As soon as he hands it to me, one of the others demands, a touch annoyed, "How do you know?" In one of those excellent, too rare moments of perfect reaction, I asked, "Why did you bring it to me?" "Because you're a jeweler." Oh. Now it's my time to shine. I'm a store manager at one of the busiest pawn shops in Northern California. And because of that, I have the high volume of customers that most don't. So that means a lot of stories. One guy bought in a stone painted green, claiming it was ancient gold, and that after aeons it had developed a patina. I tried to explain to him that all gold is ancient gold, made in something as intense as a dead star colliding, but he insisted it was gold. After about 30 minutes of discussion, he forced me to test it, and when I showed him it wasn't gold, he told me he spent $4,000 buying it off some guy. Another guy bought in a bag of used syringes and wanted to trade it for a TV. I did not oblige. Another bought in a piece of safety glass from a windshield and claimed it was a diamond, even when I assured him it wasn't. Someone else bought in a clump of bent and slightly melted forks and spoons, claiming it was a meteorite fallen from the ISS trash that was shot into space. Then someone else bought in a costume cape, claiming it was the real invisibility cloak from Harry Potter. With further questioning, he didn't think it was a prop from the movie, but the actual magical cape. As a watch guy, this is my favorite one. Someone bought in a, quote, Rolex, claiming her father gave it to them. When I showed her that it actually said Rolflex and Skiss Made, she claimed that those were misprints and that meant it was worth more because of it. After I opened the watch to show her the movement, I saw that there was no movement at all, but just a weight in the back. A couple came in with an old 1990 30-inch TV claiming that it was an antique, and they refused to leave the store until we gave them $800 for it. We showed them selling online for literally a couple of dollars, but they refused and said they knew what they had. Not in line with the crazy people, but a good story. A couple used to come in once a week and pawn stuff. Well, apparently one day the wife decided she was done with him as a husband, snuck up behind him in the store, sprayed him in the face with pepper spray, stole his car keys and his wallet and ran out of there and stole his car. Then there was the time someone came in with an obviously recently used dialysis machine. It still had blood sprayed on it like they ripped it away while it was in use, I don't know, and they tried to sell it for thousands of dollars. You know, we passed on that one. A surprisingly low amount of stuff we take in is stolen, but there was the one time one of my coworkers took in an Audemars Piguet watch and asked the guy how much he wanted to sell it for, to which he responded that he wanted at least $100, so my coworker just gave him $300. The police report was filed and nothing came back stolen, so I don't know what was up with that. I mean, pretty much anything. People came in all the time thinking they could sell or pawn something for almost as much as they bought it new. Our policy was generally to buy it for 25% of the new price, and only higher if it was an interesting or high-value item. I always hated jewelry, because you just knew the person was going to get furious at your, quote, lowball offer. I paid $10,000 for this at the jeweler's, and here's the receipt and insurance certificate. Unfortunately, we go by the weight of gold, which has a fluctuating market price, and the size and quality of the diamond. Going by our rates, I can't offer more than $200, and I can't blame them for feeling insulted. It sucks because while some people pawn stuff to feed their substance habit, which sucks for them too, you know, many of them do it because their power is going to be shut off, or they can't afford food for their kids, or because their husband's medical bills are slowly creeping up and, hell, I haven't worn this ring for years. Who cares if my grandmother gave it to me? It's gotta be worth thousands. Or the 100 other reasons poverty frickin' blows. But as the employee, you have to sit there and be stubborn because you're poor too and your frickin' dirtbag boss will deduct anything overpaid from your check. Pawn shops give you cool stories, but it does gradually crush your soul. Yeah, I guess you have to be prepared for some tantrums. I'd think people who are desperate enough could be pretty violent too and maybe break stuff. Jobs set up to exploit people down on their luck have got to be hard for a good person to work in. I took an old $10 bill into a dealer to see how much it was worth. I don't recall the year, but it was pretty old. I figured it might be worth something. The guy says, $10. Showed me what a bill would have to be like, and I asked how often he sees them. He gave me a longish answer about collectors and how they're not uncommon, but you don't see them since people hold on to them. After that, we just started to talk, so he showed me around. Nobody else was in the store, so he had the time. People also like to talk about their passions, so he was in his element and I got a bit of a history lesson. I spent 30 minutes in his store with him looking at rare money. That was cool of him not to just brush you off since you weren't trying to waste his time and not many knew a lot about it. Especially since actually valuable old money is in a totally different league than regular old money. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. Don't forget to subscribe to Am I the Genius? I might be late to this, but I worked at a pawn shop for about 6 years. I once had a customer walk up to the counter and slide a gold coin to me and say, "I think this is gold, man." This particular customer reeked of bile and looked like he was just strung out on everything possible. I looked at the coin and slid it back to him and replied, "This is a Chuck E. Cheese token. I can tell by the mouse on it." He just said, "Oh," and walked away. That was when I noticed he had crapped his pants to the point it was almost all the way down his pant leg. There was a buy and sell by my house that would give you $5 for any game and sell every game for $10. I used to go in and check the prices on all the games, and if I'd make more than 10 from GameStop, I'd buy the game, go to GameStop and sell it, and then buy all the crappy games GameStop had that were less than $5 and take them back to the buy and sell to make more money. You see, I was a smack addict at the time, so that was my job when I wasn't working at my restaurant. Worked at a traditional games store. I had plenty of sketchy white trash people coming in with their kids' old Yu-Gi-Oh! And Magic cards, thinking they were extremely valuable. Usually it was just a mismatched starter set from the early 2000s or the like. I'm not sure what started the idea that old trading cards were going to be ridiculously valuable, but no, I won't give you crystal money for your dark magician. The level of disappointment and oftentimes outright anger on their part was difficult to deal with. I began just telling trashy-looking people who weren't store regulars that we didn't purchase cards. I did once have a guy bring in a collection that had a gnarly-looking Black Lotus. I gave him a good deal for it. My dad had a real messed up woman come in and try to pawn her smack. For what? To buy more smack? As a worker in the ghetto, I get grills and gold teeth almost daily, straight from the mouth, and then they get mad when I can't accept them and they throw a fit. Every employee wears panic buttons to call the cops immediately if something happens as well. "I'll take signs you should get a job elsewhere for $300, Alex." I do some work on the administrative side for a pawn shop. Insofar as my shop, it's quite profitable. Also, bulletproof glass. Also, armed security guards. A good friend of mine owns a pawn shop in Florida. He once bought a collectible book of state quarters for less than the face value of the coins. The customer wasn't bright enough to pop the quarters out of the book and spend them. My buddy's ability to keep a straight face in those situations and make the customer feel like he was getting a deal provides me endless entertainment. A month ago, a man stole a lawnmower from the front of our store. Well, just 2 days ago, he returned to the shop with the exact same lawnmower, claiming it was his. He tried to sell it to us. Not only did the serial number on that mower match the one we had, but it still had our price tag on the handle. Worked at a comic book and memorabilia store, and people have really messed up notions of value, I can tell you. Just because it's old, it doesn't mean it's valuable. Just because it's rare, doesn't mean there's a market for it. The worst was when people would come in with things that were signed with no authentication and demand outrageous prices. Some old lady and her obviously tweaker granddaughter bought in a comic they claimed was signed by Stan Lee and wanted $1,000 for it. We laughed them out of the shop. Also, a picture of you with William Shatner that he signed has no value to anybody but you. I used to work in a pawn shop in LA. One time this guy bought in 100 $2 bills, non-consecutive, and he wanted a loan of $120. My boss told me to do the loan, so I followed the instructions and gave the guy $120. The guy then managed not to come back for the bills, so he made an $80 profit from sheer stupidity. I was a Babbage's worker in the early 2000s. That's basically like UK GameStop. This was a case of a company being dumb. GameStop either owned or acquired Funkoland and a couple of other game store brands at the time, Babbage's being amongst them. We had a local guy that would drive about an hour each way and buy out every single copy of certain NES games and then bring them to our store. It'd do the same in reverse as well. The company would then dutifully redistribute the games to equalize inventory between the stores. All told, he made close to $50K before they figured it out and disallowed transactions of 10 games or more in one visit. Last I heard, this same guy was churning manufactured spending on gift cards, credit cards, and stuff to the tune of $60 to $70K a year. That guy knows how to hustle. I'm not a pawn shop worker, but this is still kind of a cool story, at least I think. Either way, both the shop owner and I were happy with the events that went down. I used to frequent yard sales, buy vintage items, and then take them to the antique shop and make a little money on the side. One day I found this little glass figurine at a yard sale for 25 cents. When I flipped the item over and saw the red Occupied Japan logo, I got extremely excited and bought it on the spot. I took it over to the shop and sold it for 45 bucks. The shop owner wouldn't go any higher, but hey, I made 44 bucks and 75 cents off a quick purchase, so I wasn't too worried. The figure was actually worth about 125. Either way, I made money and that figure is still sitting in his shop for sale at 125. People bring in dumb crap all the time to get a few bucks for their substance habits. It starts from a candies box stolen from the shop next to the pawn shop, to plungers, rubber ducks, electronics, real and fake jewelry that they thought was real, and ending on cars. Again, exploitative and nasty business depending on what area you live in, but one certainly seems to accrue some interesting stories doing it. I worked in a pawn shop in the Midwest for a year and a half. We had a very large woman bring in this bizarre-looking machine. She sets it on the counter and says, "I want $500 for it." We're just staring at the machine and then looking at her, and finally the pawnbroker goes, what is it?" "It's a homemade breast pump." Yeah, this woman made her own breast pump and thought she'd get $500 for it. So weird and gross. So many people try to bring in their tattoo equipment. I don't know if other pawn shops take stuff like this, but in my area, it's a hard pass due to bodily fluids. Gross. And some of these people get so angry when you tell them no, screaming about how they spent $6,000 on this and how can we not take it. We had this guy who'd dig through the garbage cans and try to bring us stuff to sell. Not uncommon, but it was very obvious that this stuff was coming straight from the dumpster, and he dug it out like 10 minutes before he walked into the store. One time we had to kick him out because he was losing his mind over the fact that we wouldn't give him 15 bucks for a desk lamp that had a broken, bendy neck. And this was despite the fact the pawnbroker pulled up the exact lamp on Target's website selling for 10 bucks, not broken. This guy just didn't get it and was calling us B-words and C-words over it. One of my favorites is the lady who called asking if we take books. We told her we'll consider collector item books, but before we could explain, she got all excited and hung up, saying that's exactly what she had. Now, when I say collector's items, I mean like first editions or one of those special edition movie books or whatever. This lady proceeds to come and ask for help carrying in her 10, yes, that's right, 10 totes of, in her mind, collector books. These collector books? 10% romance novels that you can buy in bulk from any thrift store. The conversation was the following. The pawnbroker said, "Ma'am, these aren't collector's items. We can't give you anything for them." "What do you mean? They're collector's items. They're all from the same publisher and everything." "Yeah, that's not what makes them collector's items. I'm sorry, we can't take these. You could consider donating them to a thrift store." "Are you kidding me? Do you know how many years I've spent cherishing these? These are collector's items. I am a collector and I collected these." I'm sorry, ma'am. "I will not be leaving this store until I get at least $300 for my collection." We ended up having to call the cops because she sat in the parking lot for 5 hours ranting and raving about how we're a scam. The last straw for my boss was when she opened the door and screamed at the top of her lungs like a 5-year-old and then slammed the door again. As a side note, my manager was the manager of said pawn shop and that's how we met. He loves to tell people that he got his wife at the same place he got his nice watch and TV. What an idiot. We combat a lot of people coming in with stupidly high asking prices by keeping an equivalent item in stock at a reasonable price. For example, the 1780 Austria silver thaler, which has Maria Theresa on it, if original, goes for a lot of money, but almost all of them are reproductions. The original dies were never destroyed and were used to make the reproductions, therefore they look exactly like the originals. One day we had a father and son come in so excited they'd finally hit the jackpot. They showed me their Austria thaler. I offered them a little bit shy of the silver content, which was 20 bucks at the time, and the dad got real angry. He claimed we were trying to rip him off. That's understandable, I thought, because it's almost identical to the expensive version. So I tried to explain to him that there's hundreds of thousands of reproductions, and he still didn't get it. His son did. So now his son and I tried to get him to come around, and he wouldn't. That's when I went to the back room and pulled out a bucket with about 15 of the same kind of thaler that he bought in, and I told him that if he thought they were worth thousands of dollars, I'd sell him mine for 22 bucks each. He never even flinched and said, "I'm not here to buy these, I'm here to sell mine." At that point, I just said, "We aren't buying those thalers anymore. Have a nice day." It's kind of the opposite, but in the mid-80s I worked for a guy that ran food trailers that went to different festivals and stuff. It was a blast of a summer job. But anyways, kids would dig around the house to find money to blow at the arcades and for food and rides and stuff. Many of these kids would get into the coin collection, seeing 10 or 20 but not realizing they were silver certificates, silver quarters daily, Indian head pennies. We even had a guy pay for his drink with a roll of buffalo nickels. Musical instruments. I'm sorry, but your student flute from 1970 is tarnished and dented. Not to mention the cost of replacing the pad and corks would be more than buying a brand new student flute. Keep it for the memories. They're worth more than your crappy flute. 10 years in experience running a pawn shop. Fake Rolex watches, family heirlooms, parking lot buys that turned out to be fake. They were all the norm. The weirdest thing I've loaned on would be dentures. I'd give the guy 10 to 20. I was asked why I took them, and my response was always the same. If that motherfricker wants to eat solid food again, he'll come get them. He always came, and I redeemed them. What is the most ridiculous thing that you've been asked to do at work? I was once asked to not go to my uncle's funeral. I was told, and I quote, "Well, he won't know you're not there." I quit very shortly thereafter and reported the manager to executive management. Jerk. My mom got fired because she missed one day of work ever to go to her father's funeral. She'd worked there for 3 or 4 years and never missed a single day up until that point. Retired paramedic. I was told to immediately place a freshly delivered newborn back inside the mother. She delivered in a transport ambulance en route to Weill Cornell, and lost it that her baby wasn't born in a hospital, and further, not born in a good hospital. The mother told me to hold the baby in with your fricking hand, and I explained that that wouldn't work, and that we were having this child on 3rd Avenue in the middle 50s, and she flipped. So she and I had an agreement that I'd say the baby was still inside her body till we backed up at the hospital. I guess this satisfied the requirement of being born at the hospital versus next to the dry cleaners on 3rd Avenue. So far as that kid knows, she was born in the Weill Cornell ER ambulance bay. I got asked by my boss to go to the building site next door and just ask the builders to stop construction as they were being too loud. Not for a specific length of time, just to stop working. I had to ask him what he thought that would actually achieve. A while back, there was a carpenter renovating the office next to ours. My boss went next door and yelled at him, "You should do this after hours. Do you like listening to hammering and sawing all day while you're at work?" And the carpenter said, "Actually, yes, I do." I was asked to lay off a group of employees for another manager. She begged me to do it, and I initially refused. This manager selected and approved the list of people being let go, and was 100% responsible for even needing a layoff. She overhired in her area because she misrepresented her projected needs and let her group's performance fall below standard. Nobody wants to be a part of a big layoff on the receiving or giving side, unless you're a total sadist. And I really believe if you're laying your people off, you need to have the stones to do it yourself. Period. I wound up doing it because everyone in the building already figured out something was happening based on her behavior, and it seemed excessively cruel to postpone things since everyone was on edge. I felt like the angel of death that day. People wouldn't even make eye contact with me as I walked the halls because if I stopped at someone's desk, they knew they were losing their job. My people were terrified, and I still feel terrible about how that day went down because I couldn't say anything until it was done. Layoffs are horrible, and this manager hiding from her responsibility made it even worse. Fortunately, my boss agreed and he fired her for it. Oof, well, at least there was some small justice in this one instance. Often these people responsible just walk away completely scot-free, having learned very little to nothing. It sucks that you had to be the one to clean up their mess. Back when I was the manager of a movie theater, I'd just got done working 14 hours because somebody else had called in sick. I tried to submit payroll to accounting, and the fax wouldn't go through. I asked the accountant to go to the office, about 2 blocks from her home, and see if she could fix it. She said that she was too tired and that I should instead drive the 50 miles to hand deliver it. I ended up doing it because if I didn't, then my staff wouldn't get paid. But there were about 8 nasty emails I sent afterwards to various higher-ups. A few weeks later, I quit that job to become a busboy. Single best career move I've ever made. Not as horrifying as some of the others, but in the early 90s I worked at a well-known US depot for office supplies. One time, for reasons that I'll never understand, an edict came down that a certain class of inventory was to be destroyed and discarded. That meant perfectly good merchandise, including office furniture, lamps, computers, printers, copiers, fax machines, and some other random bits were to be taken out back and literally smashed to pieces with a hammer, then thrown in the bin. The most amazing part was that under no circumstances was this stuff allowed to be given away, sold, or otherwise allowed to survive or benefit anyone. Several employees begged and pleaded to be allowed to buy some of the things, but nope, better to destroy it and get nothing in return. It wasn't a huge number of items, but it was easily 10 grand worth of stuff. We used to have to destroy hundreds and hundreds of books at my job, and we weren't allowed to do anything with them but put them in the recycle bin. This is called stripping a book. I felt like my heart was being ripped out when I had to strip my favorite books and throw them away. Was asked to clean up a bathroom full of doo-dee. My training specifically said that I was not to clean it, but rather close off the section and leave the manager to do it. Yep, you don't have to do it. Even if you have an actual retail job which states in your contract that you have to do general cleaning, cleaning fecal matter isn't general and should be left for cleaners or managers. Worked in many retail jobs where the manager would try and get people to do that rather than hire a full-time cleaner. I was asked to do this QA thing before the week's end. When I asked if she wanted me to wait until next week because otherwise I got into overtime, she responded by saying, "Do it this week, but put it into next week's payroll." No. That made me so angry. To clarify, in my situation, I wasn't required to provide a notice. I was simply being nice. I don't care too much about the cash. I figure what's good for the workplace is good for me. So this is why it angered me so much. Also, she did this kind of thing all the time. I was once ordered to rake up pine needles. All the pine needles. At a camp named Pinewoods. Aptly named. I was working as a desk-side technician for an IT company a couple of years back, when one day it was quiet and we didn't have much to do. So my boss had me pick grapes from his plant at his house. I used to work in a food processing plant when I was in high school. The job sucked, it was hot on the lines, and the place smelled horrible. I got told by my boss that I had to go outside and pick up cigarette butts from the sidewalk where the other workers went outside during breaks to smoke. I wasn't a smoker, and I was pretty angry at first, but being outside picking up nasty cigarette butts was actually more enjoyable than working inside on the lines. I had a serious reevaluation of my job that day. Yeah, I worked at McDonald's in high school, and there was a task called the Continental, which involved picking up all of the McDonald's garbage in a 3-block radius of the store. It was more enjoyable than working inside, even in the depths of winter in Edmonton. I was an Army officer, and at the time, a company commander. Not only was I instructed to assist in the sweeping of an unspeakable act offense under the rug, but I was ordered to appoint as my acting company first sergeant, top sergeant for the company, a man I'd relieved of his duty position and assigned to a desk for misconduct with female trainees. I refused and actually got the unspeakable act victim the medical and mental assistance she needed. He was still assigned the post by a higher command, and less than 2 weeks later I lost my command for creating a work environment so hostile I'd lost the confidence of the NCOs and sergeant. I still don't regret it, even though it eventually cost me my career. I was asked to not have to go to the bathroom. I'm dead serious here. My boss recently told all the employees there will be no more bathroom breaks. Considering we already don't get a second break and some of us don't get a lunch either, yeah, that's illegal. Got told to work for 2 months without being paid as a trial to see what kind of employee I would be, before he decided if he was going to offer me a paid job or not. Also, it was a commercial aeroplane pilot job, not an entry-level position, and for the love of all things chocolate, this was not an internship. He was somewhat surprised when I declined the offer. In the army, I was told to pull weeds in Iraq before a congressman came to visit. Oh man, this war must be going well. Look at this landscaping. My first job was in retail. I smelled something funky near my break room. I went to check it out and found dried-up diarrhea on the ground and went and told my manager. He asked me why I was telling him and not busy cleaning it. Turns out everyone knew but didn't say anything because they didn't want to clean it. Frick my life. I'm in the Navy and I had to sweep water off the pier as it was raining. Told to get onto a forklift that had a piece of plywood thrown on the forks without a harness and an air hose put into my hand, and then I was lifted about 20 feet into the air and got told to clean the rafters of the wood shop up. After about 5 seconds of spraying, the dust cloud got so thick you could barely see. Isn't that pretty much word for word the example OSHA gives on what not to do with a forklift? Yeah, I'm fairly certain that I've seen some exact health and safety diagrams essentially telling people to just not stand on top of pallets being lifted by forklifts, and that if they do, they will spontaneously combust and kill all their friends and loved ones, or something like that. I wasn't really paying attention. Worked at a grocery chain as a courtesy or utility clerk. The vendor for 7-Up and Dr. Pepper screwed up stacking their pallets, so they all fell over, creating a nice pile of broken glass, sticky soda, and wet, messy cardboard. Boss made me clean it all up and told me to not leave it even for a second. I got it all cleaned up in about 2 hours, not bad save for me nearly getting shanked by some large glass shards on the floor. But where it became unreasonable was the very next day, where I got called into the office and written up by the same boss. Why? I'd failed to do floor inspections. He expected me to be able to be in 2 places at once. So that was fun to contest. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. When I was 18, I worked part-time at UPS, and also part-time at Burger King, which was more of a way to eat for free every day than anything else. This was in 2000 or 2001, so the minimum wage was still $5.15, and I wasn't making much more than at BK. I'm working the drive-thru window one night when a visibly intoxicated couple came into the dining room and ordered some food. My manager was working register, and one other guy was there cooking the food. The drunks order a bunch of deep-fried stuff, and we didn't have enough chicken tenders on hold, so the manager tells them it's going to be a couple minutes while the tenders and fries cook. No problem, they're going to go use the restroom. The restrooms were down a hall, and the doors faced each other, so we didn't think anything of it when they went down the hall together. Their order comes up, and they're not back yet, so we bag it up and leave it under the heat lamps while we wait for them. 2 minutes turns into 5, and I'm busy on the drive-thru window, so I kind of forget about them. An indeterminate amount of time goes by, probably 15 minutes, maybe half an hour, and my manager asks me if I expedited that order, meaning give them their food. I tell her no, they never came back for their food after going to the bathroom. She goes to the women's room, doesn't see anyone, and then opens the door to the men's room. I heard her dry heave from my station at the window, a good 20 feet away. She came around the wall that separated the dining area from the work area, and it looked like she'd just seen a ghost or a dead body. I asked her what was wrong, and she just shook her head, telling me that she'd take over drive-thru window because I had to clean the bathroom. I geared up, elbow-length gloves, goggles, dust mask, and slickers, not knowing what kind of heck was unleashed in that stall. Nothing, and I mean nothing, could have prepared me for what I saw in there. It looked like they'd hooked up a colostomy bag full of mostly liquid crap and semi-chunky throw-up to a paint sprayer and had blasted every single surface in there with the crap puke. The stall was caked, the door handle had poop smeared on it, there were chunks of various bodily excretions in the sink, next to the sink, in the trash can, next to the trash can, just frickin' everywhere I looked there was crap, puke, or a lovely mixture. I didn't even make it 3 steps into the room before my gag reflex reminded me that it existed. My eyes were watering, my stomach was doing somersaults, and I was choking back my own barrage of throw-up when it hits me. Hey, screw this. Nope. Not a frickin' chance, I choked out through gasps of air. Not a frickin' chance, and heck, I'm cleaning all that up. Call hazmat. Half joking, not thinking my manager would actually expect me to clean that up. Boy, was I ever wrong. Terrence, if that bathroom isn't clean by the end of your shift, then don't bother coming back. She didn't get to finish the sentence. I'd already thrown my hat and shirt on the floor. Sorry, Jill, but you don't pay me nearly enough for that. I can find another crappy minimum wage job tomorrow. Good luck with that debacle in there. And just like the phantom turd spewers, I was gone. I saved up for a trip to England and France. I had 2 weeks of vacation that I'd planned for months. My boss called and wanted me to come home early to work someone's shift. When told she's on vacation in Europe, the boss was like, "Can't she just catch a flight?" For $11 an hour that would have been paid anyway on vacation pay. I no longer work at that company. I got fired for a bad attitude, and I used my time out to go back to school and get a job that I love, making more money with better management. I was asked to skip an immigration meeting that I needed to have to stay in the country for a 1-hour meeting with a client, even though I told them about it weeks in advance. I informed my boss that if I skipped the meeting, I would be ineligible to work in the country in 2 weeks. They still bothered me to try and reschedule my federal government meeting. It was just ridiculous. I was once asked to take a pay cut so I could work more hours. Yes, they wanted to tack on an extra 16 hours, Saturday and Sunday, to the work week while reducing pay so that I'd have the same amount of money for more work. They were angry when I said no, then told me I had no choice. When I told them I quit, they tried to tell me I couldn't. They were insistent that I was going to work for them. A manager asked me to wrap my arm up in a bin bag and stick my hand into a loo to try and unblock it. I was a waiter/barman taking food out to customers. I highlighted this to him and he insisted that I do it. I promptly told him to F off and mentioned health and safety. So he ended up doing it. On a side note, he was fired 2 weeks later for making inappropriate comments to female staff members. So yeah, he was a D-bag anyway. One time, a customer asked me for all the money in the registers. Since he had a weapon, I didn't feel that it was that unreasonable at the time. Looking back, it was a bit of an odd request. Listen, I don't want to sound like an alarmist, but there is a non-zero chance that you might have been robbed. Of course, you should review the purchase history on your point-of-service machine just to be sure, but unless your restaurant was offering $500 cashback on 9mm inspections, there's every chance that that wasn't 100% above board. Bartender. On Good Friday at 9 p.m., a lady had the nerve to ask me to tell another customer to quit swearing because it was Good Friday. I told her as nicely as I could that we're all adults, and that I simply wouldn't feel okay with telling another paying customer to stop swearing. My boss saw the conversation and me walking away while she had a sour expression on her face, and asked me what that was about, so I told him. He actually had the nerve to tell me that I needed to go tell the guy to watch his mouth. Now, keep in mind, my boss was a cool guy, so I could speak openly to him. Not the best bar manager, he was a banker before and got the job because he was the owner's friend and just got tired of banking. So I responded to him like I wish I could have responded to her, which was something along the lines of, if the sanctimonious witch is so frickin' worried about swearing on Good Friday, what the frick is she doing in a sports bar drinking? I literally will walk out of this job right now before I impose her will on another customer because of her beliefs. To which he said, oh, good point, screw her. I was asked to teach an ESL class in the closet of the library. The librarian didn't clean out the closet, the custodian merely shoved a few desks into it. When there was another class in the library proper, I had to close the closet door. We could hardly breathe with all the dust and the lack of ventilation. I quit shortly thereafter and reported the school to the Office for Civil Rights for discriminating against non-English-speaking students. My own review. My boss was too lazy to do the department's reviews, so he told me to do all of them. I told him to F off. He said he'd take me to HR. I told him I'd bring the email where he asked me to review my co-workers, which was his job. I got a great review and he bought me lunch. We did this at Costco. We were asked to do our own review at home on our own time. The boss would read it, rewrite it to make things look good, and we were asked to sign the real version. Train a guy who was making more than I was to be my boss. Yeah, nah, screw that. Got asked to hide my chest milk after it was pumped. I had the audacity to carry it from the room I pumped in to the freezer as if it wasn't a bag full of shame milk. Don't bring it to work if you're not going to share. When working overtime or even a regular 8-hour day, our break is still 15 minutes, which is timed, and we're expected to use the bathroom during our timed breaks. Running back and forth to the bathroom isn't a frickin' break. Can you adjust my package, please? I'm a nurse, by the way. I used to work in a restaurant that was above a pro shop for golf. Across the street was a ski area. This is Bear Mountain, California. The guy that owned the restaurant where I worked also owned the seasonal snack bar and restaurant in the chalet at the bottom of the ski slope. He had a big chest freezer in the chalet where he kept a bunch of meat, and some idiot turned off all the electricity, including the stuff going to the freezer. This happened when the ski slope shut down for the season. My boss didn't discover it for almost 2 months. He told me, I have an unpleasant job for you to do, but you have to do it. When he lifted the lid on the freezer, my shock of how bad it smelled literally made me chuck up right there on the floor. I could tell my boss was close to hurling as well, but he had already been exposed to the horror once already, so he was prepared. He told me to put it all in garbage bags and tote it out to the dumpster. He told me that dealing with the smell and the slime was really nothing more than mind over matter. He looked me square in the eye and told me, I don't mind, so it don't matter. I was 14 years old and living on my own. I needed that job, so I did it. Once a week, my boss makes me go to Carvel and get an ice cream cake and sit and eat it with her. She says she can't fit into her clothes. I guess she wants me to not fit into my clothes either. When I was about 16, I got hired to do cleanup on a paint factory that was over 100 years old. They had these massive paint thinner tanks on a hill behind the plant that were gravity-fed into the factory and they'd clogged. The boss wanted us to physically climb down into the tank, which was waist-deep full of Varsol, that paint thinner, and to remove said substance with 5-gallon buckets. This was a while ago back in Newfoundland, and safety gear didn't exist on the island yet. We all refused, and after that spent most of our time smoking green herb on the roof. We all got fired a few days later, although some of the other stuff we did there will probably show up as some strange form of cancer at some point in the future. Writing an HTML parser using regular expression. I'm so sorry. I don't know what this means, but given how many more code-savvy people were mortified in replying to your comment, allow me to extend my sincere, confused condolences on here as well. I had a customer ask me to fill their propane tank in a thunderstorm, with no power. They were absolutely perplexed when I politely told them that I could not. They got mad and told my manager, who looked at them like they had 3 heads and a death wish. They met one of those criteria, and after much arguing, promptly told them to leave. He was awesome. I was making $12 an hour as an office temp at a government office. My boss filled a box full of pepper spray, flares, and flashbangs. Then she labeled it toiletries and told me to take it out to air cargo and send it on a passenger flight to one of our sites. I didn't want to go to jail for causing a mid-air accident, so I took the stuff for myself and distributed it to other projects within the same government department. A few weeks went by as they tried to determine what had happened to their stuff. Finally, my boss came into my office and said, "This is theft over $1,000. We'll have to get the RCMP, or the federal cops, involved." I told her, "You can't do that without implicating yourself in a worse crime. You should just forget about the whole matter." A week later, they cancelled my contract with a temp agency and hired me directly at $24 an hour plus benefits. I've been working as a substitute teacher for the last few weeks. At this very moment, I'm sitting at a desk in an empty hallway staring at a door. I will sit at this desk for the next 3 hours. To answer your question, I find it semi-ridiculous that I'll be compensated for this time. What was the most cringe way that someone ever tried to ask you out? In the 7th grade, I was a very awkward child. Kind of chubby, no fashion sense, and my face generally resembled that of a gorilla. I'd already accepted the fact that boys weren't going to like me. One day I was hanging out with a guy friend, Richard. Richard was a sweet kid and pretty cute, and I'd met him through another friend. It was just Richard and me chilling in a hallway when he suddenly asked me to the school dance that was happening on a Friday. I couldn't believe it. A cute guy had just asked me to a dance? Are you sure this was real life? Say yes, you idiot. Say yes. So, of course, I did what any reasonable 13-year-old girl would do. I screamed and ran away. Richard didn't want to hang out with me again after that, and I still feel bad about it to this day, a decade later. Went to a guy's house to do a project in high school. It involved the internet, and while he sat next to me, I tried to navigate to Google. Unfortunately, the address bar auto-filled and took me to his last Google search. Page 2 of results for my name. Every link had been clicked. We both just sat in silence. I think he should have said, "Well, I had to make sure you weren't a murderer before letting you into my house." I mean, he would have still been creepy, but you'd be the suspected murderer. I managed a cafe that was located about an hour or something's drive from my house. There was this guy who had it really bad for me. He came in a couple of times a day and refused to be served by any of my staff. Just me. Anyway, as if that wasn't bad enough, one day during the winter it got very icy, so I decided to not drive home, but stay in a B&B instead. Safety and crap, you know? Don't ask me how, but he found out and stayed in the same B&B. I was woken up by him banging on my door. When I opened, he stands there fuming about how I don't trust him, or why else would I lock the door to my room during the night? Now, who doesn't lock the door in a B&B? Also, well, guess what? He obviously tried the door. What the frick, man? Also, by the time I made it to work the next morning, a 2-minute walk from the B&B, he had already managed to tell a good portion of the townies that he and I had spent the night together. This guy actually scared the crap out of me. I regularly passed up other people working on the same street to not have to walk to the parking lot alone. I'm not working there anymore, and since I'm living far away, I saw him driving through my town last summer once, but since he doesn't have my address and my house is kind of off the beaten track, I'm not too worried. Also, my boyfriend is living with me now, so all is well. Yes, this is indeed cringe, if it's possible for something to be gross, frightening, and still be something as trivial as cringe. What kind of sick gratification that man got after claiming you'd notched his bedpost is beyond me. Surely he just hated himself internally. During camp, I once heard mention of a girl who was into me. I wasn't that much of a fan of her, so I didn't follow it up. The day after, I came past this girl and noticed part of my name written on her hand. I asked what the deal was. She lifted her sleeve and my name was written all over her body. I was so freaked out that I didn't know how to react. I just ran away. I bump into her here and there nowadays. It's still extremely awkward. In high school, this guy who liked me used to leave love notes in my locker. They'd always had really disturbing pictures or poems in them. Not knowing that it was a friend, I used to bring them to the morning table to be like, "Who the frick is leaving these in my locker?" I feel bad about it now, because it seems everyone knew it was him apart from me. A girl walked up to me once and said, "You're my boyfriend now. Accept it or I'm breaking up with you." I mean, she sounds hilarious, depending on the tone and the number of dangerous objects she was holding. Look at me. Look at me. I am your girlfriend now. When I was in the 4th grade, I remember having the biggest crush on a girl in my PE class. Having thought things through, I decided that I needed her to know of my undying love for her, so I wrote her a note to deliver to her in PE. So finally, when we're all sitting in our grid formation on the gym floor, I decide the time has in fact come. I get up and start walking to the fountain. She's in between, and I'd planned on just dropping her the note en route. However, in the 5 seconds between me getting up and when I'm to drop the note off, I decide that this is too easy. I've got to give her a challenge. I then proceed to the water fountain with a new plan. As soon as I get there, I plunge the note into the water, creating a wet, squishy mess that resembles a white piece of crap. My logic at this point in my life was that the wet paper would create a situation in which she'd have to spend some time decoding the note. By making the note harder to read, she'd undoubtedly be impressed. On the way back to the seat, I dropped the white-looking turd thing off with her. As you can probably guess, she didn't know what in God's name it was. She just stared at it on the gym floor for a second with her mouth open. Before she could say anything, I hightailed it back to my seat, giggling the whole way. She not once ever spoke to me again. I think it's safe to assume that she did not decode the message. In short, I once tried to tell a crush that I loved her by writing a note, soaking it in water, scrunching it up like a turd, and dropping it on the floor in front of her. I once sent a girl an email in reply to a mass email from a university course we were taking together, professing my interest in her. I clicked reply and not reply all, so I thought it was safe. I didn't know how listservs work. Yeah, I regretted that one. My work started using a program that began hiring ex-cons. One of the guys hired through this program started showing an interest in me. I wasn't attracted to him at all and made it clear to him repeatedly. Long story short, he got fired 3 months later but kept coming around the store to, quote, visit his friends. I went out to my car to read during lunch like I normally do, and there was this creepy metal and mesh flower on my windshield. I look around the parking lot to see who could have left it, and I see nobody. I threw it into a grassy area and forgot about it. I read through my lunch hour and went inside, and no sooner than I clock in, I hear a page that I have a phone call for me. It's him. All he says is, "You look so pretty when you're reading." I hung up immediately and told the manager. He kept doing more things that escalated the creepiness. I ended up getting an emergency restraining order against him when I found out he'd added me as an emergency contact with his parole officer. I didn't even know the guy. A close friend tells me she's had very strong feelings for me for the past 3 years. She tells me this a couple of days before we graduate college. I didn't feel the same way about her. According to a mutual friend, her original plan was to romantically profess her love on the day of our graduation in front of all of our family and friends. You know, I have one that makes it seem like some guys never really grow out of that awkward high school crush phase. A couple of years ago, I worked the counter at a Chinese restaurant. They were a fairly busy place right beside my house, and I'd work for a few hours almost every day after school to get them through the rush. As a result, I had a lot of regulars who I recognized, and I behaved in a very friendly, familiar way with many customers. One guy would come in around 9 p.m. once every couple of weeks and was just very quiet. I'd give him his food and he'd stammer out a thank you and make terrified, jutting all over the place eye contact during our interaction. I mean, this was no problem. He seemed like a normal middle-aged man. One night, he picked up his takeout bag and somehow managed to get his finger snagged under a staple and cut himself. He started bleeding pretty profusely, and I grabbed some napkins, trying to help him, but he kept playing it off and just booked it out there. The next day, I got to work, and a bunch of my customers were telling me they heard about me on the radio. Apparently, this guy was a very popular morning radio DJ, and he had been talking about a girl he gets takeouts from and is completely in love with for months. He'd mock all of his awkward interactions with me and profess his love and how beautiful he thought I was, and I guess that in telling the most recent staple story, he revealed that I worked at a Chinese takeout place, and a ton of my customers and coworkers put it together. Everyone was recounting all of these cringy, humiliating things the guy had done while picking up food from me that I'd barely noticed or remembered. It was so weird. I felt like a tabloid celebrity. He kept coming in, and I never told him that I knew he made a habit of mentioning me on the air, but I did try really hard to make sure our interactions went smoothly and to bolster his social confidence just a little bit. I really hope the rest of the locale wasn't just staring wide-eyed at the two of you for the remainder of these encounters, because that just seems awkward as all heck. It's also completely realistic that a man who was that jittery in social interactions could be smooth as all heck on the radio. I'm a very different man on the stage or on my microphone compared to regular human conversation. I actually seem like I have a personality in the former activities. Not sure if this person had a crush or was just crazy, but anyway, so I met this girl at a bar. Nice girl, cute, blonde, typical college type. I exchanged numbers with her, thinking that we could hang out again. Fast forward to a few days later when we were just texting back and forth, setting up a date. She asked, "So how's tonight sound for you?" "Oh, I can't. I'm meeting my friend for drinks because she's leaving town." "Hey, wait, you didn't tell me you were seeing other girls? I thought we had something going on. I'm sorry, I can't do this. Please stop texting me." I just told her I'm meeting a good friend whom I've known for years and she refuses to listen. So I thought, great, dodged a real crazy bullet right there. And then she texts me saying she wants to meet again, and I said no because she was being a little crazy and making me uncomfortable. Here are some of the best creepy texts she sent me afterwards. "No, I won't stop texting you until you explain to me why you won't come out and see me." I'd already told her at this point that she was being overreactive and making me uncomfortable, and that I lost interest. "Do us a favor and stop being a butthole. Why can't you put the past behind you and give us a second chance? Forgiveness is a virtue." Then, "Just pretend that never happened and we can be happy together. I'll give you a day to get over it. We don't have to meet immediately. We can text and see how we feel. I'm in no rush." And finally, "You need to learn how Americans work. You're obviously just being rude like all other Asians." I was so glad that iOS 7 had a built-in block feature. I'm still keeping the texts in case something happens to me in the future. Freshman year of high school, this one girl had a thing for me. She'd talk to me in the halls a lot and stare. Well, one day, as I was getting picked up by my mum, she flung herself onto the hood of my car and just professed her love for me, in front of my mum. Mum hasn't let me live that one down yet. In fact, it's a topic of conversation when we have guests over. I bet it's a thing of pride for your mum, having ladies literally fling themselves around her son. You mean literally flinging themselves in front of cars? You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. Oh, it is my time to shine. So I had a problem in high school, and that problem was that I would attract really creepy boys. Like ones who'd publicly declare their love for me and follow me around boys. Not good. But the one that tops the cake was this guy Tony. I'd known him for a while, but we'd never really talked until one day when he started messaging me about his problems on Facebook. I was like, this is kind of weird, but maybe he's just lonely? We become better friends, and one night we're talking and he tells me that he's really into me and he'd like to kiss me. At this point I had a boyfriend that I was crazy about, so I told him it was nice, but I had a boyfriend. Bam. 2 days later my boyfriend broke up with me. Tony calls me up to comfort me that night, being all nice and telling me how beautiful I am and how much he cares about me. The next day, he walks me to and from every class, wants to hang out after school, and texts me all day. Now, I'm not interested in dating him at all, and having just broken up with my boyfriend, I tell him that I appreciate everything he's done, but I'm not interested in dating him or anyone for a while. Yes, you are. You owe me. Excuse me? There is no way you would put up with all of my bullcrap if you weren't interested, and besides, I was there for you when your boyfriend broke up with you. Turns out, Tony had a history of being horrible to former girlfriends, and he was extremely manipulative. This was the beginning of threats of him not being alive anymore if I didn't date him, following me around school, and drunk texts and calls in the middle of the night. It finally ended when he told me to be his girlfriend or he'd move away and wreck his life. I told him good luck, and he did. Last I heard, he was in jail for extremely inappropriate behavior with a minor. I once wrote a love poem about the girl I liked. Apparently, the complexities of the human brain, unraveled by your long blonde mane, is not a line that attracts women. I don't know if I'm more embarrassed by the rejection or by the awful poetry. Okay, so it looks like a lot of you want to see the full poem. The first and worst of my short poetry career. This one is titled, So Love is Nothing. Love, excruciatingly painful. Why do you steal my heart? I try to ignore you, but you're always there. Gnawing away, driving my mind insane, filling my body with your delusional dreams, ignoring the obvious truth. I don't know why, it just is so. You cloud the brain with doubt. Love, lust, I do not know you. Why do you persist in this game of yours? What did I do to deserve this? Why must you be so cruel that you don't love me yourself? You took my love, but nothing in return, just the void. A black hole sucks you away from me. Fate. Why be so? The complexities of the human brain, unraveled by your long blonde mane. Oh, one kiss, I cry, but nothing in return. Darkness closes on this dwindling light. One day, it will shine bright. I was 10 or 11 years old and had just gotten a Game Boy and Pokemon Red for Christmas. A boy in my class noticed and was super excited. He watched me play and eventually got Pokemon Blue for himself so we could play together. We bonded a lot over Pokemon and played at every lunch break. Of course, I didn't get at the time that he had a crush on me as he was a very shy kid, and I was new to this thing of boys liking me. Eventually, we started going home to our places and playing after school. At this time, he started to warm up to me, so he decided it was a good idea to start tooting really loudly. I still remember us sitting in one sofa each in my living room and him letting them rip every other minute. He declared happily how great it was to be home from school because he could let him rip, and I just sat there wondering what the heck had just happened. In short, a kid that was crushing on me went home to my place and started a butt orchestra. I mean, Junior skipped a few stages of the relationship there. You generally don't start completely grossing out your former romantic partner until you've locked them down in place, and the legal hassle of leaving you is greater than their disgust for your bodily emissions. And even then, they can just toot right back at you, so play it smart, people. Met a girl in my chemistry class. We started talking and usually sat next to each other. One day I mentioned that I'm a little hungry and I'll probably get lunch after class. She says she's hungry too, and we decide to get lunch together. Normally, I'd be excited that a girl even talked to me, but she was way out of my league, so I didn't think she'd even have a morsel of interest in me. After lunch, we go back to our residence hall. We lived in the same building. I go to get on the elevator up to the 6th floor, and she stops me by placing a hand on my forearm and says, "Wait, I think I left my sweater in your room." And I simply look at her and say, "You've never been in my room before." After this, I facepalmed so hard and I regret it every day. Now she doesn't even look at me. In short, you've never been in my room before, and never will be. Not me, but a girl who I'll call Lexi in my class is a classic 10 out of 10 and has to deal with this stuff on a regular basis. There's another guy that goes to my school who I'll call Shiloh, who has absolutely no concept as to how social situations work and in the past has fallen in love with any girl who even talks to him. Because of the continuous stream of guys that Lexi had to deal with, she has her phone set in a way that will only receive calls from approved numbers. So Shiloh stole her phone and approved his own number. He then proceeded to ask her out and tell her that he'd enjoy rubbing his sack over her butt. Classy as F. Oh boy, Greg. Greg was this weirdo guy at my school who was 2 years ahead of me. Let me paint you a picture. Short and skinny, with a lazy eye and a huge scar on his neck from a track procedure. Super duper gothed out. This is like 2004 to 2006. Black gloves with safety pins everywhere. He sometimes wore a Phantom of the Opera mask to school. Last time I saw him on any kind of social media, he was wearing a red silk cape in the profile picture. You get it. He was in my health class. He was weird, but he seemed harmless, and my health class was full of buttheads who'd pick on the kid for no reason. And little baby freshman me thought she needed to be super nice to him just to make up for everything. I didn't think much of it, just, tried not being a butthead. Well, come springtime, I walk into the journalism lab and I sit down at my computer to find, oh, what's this? A note under my mouse. All of my friends are curiously gathered around me, and I read my name, and then, if you're reading this, it means I didn't have the stones to ask you in person, but... And thus begins the note where he asks me to prom with him. This is like maybe 10 days before prom, by the way. Apparently, he's been in love with me the whole semester and had even changed around his class schedule to not only be in another class with me, but also so he could pass by me in the hallways. I tell him, no, sorry, I'd already planned to have a sleepover at my friend's house that night. I was 14, okay? I didn't know any better. So as far as I was concerned, that solved it. I didn't hear from him much after that. The next year, no classes with him, barely any contact, until one fateful day, about 10 days before prom, I'm walking out of my journalism class and boom, there he is, right in my face. Hey, do you want to go to prom with me this year? This time it's easier. No thank you, sorry. But hey, it was his senior year and he'd be graduating and I'd never have to see him again, right? Great! Oh, he's joining the army? Well, that's nice. Basic starts a month after graduation? Well, good luck, pal. And then I was free. No Greg, not even a thought of him until my junior year. I walk into the cafeteria before school one morning and there he is, looking as gothy and weird as ever. He starts walking towards me and I make a dash to the girls' bathroom, pretending I didn't see him. My school didn't really allow visitors, so I was sure he'd be gone soon. And then that afternoon, I was sitting at lunch, eating with my little sister and a group of our friends. I'd considered eating in the bathroom Mean Girls style just in case, but no. And he walks up to me with tears in his eyes, asks to talk to me for a second. Sure. In front of everyone, he tells me he has something for me. He whips out a stack of 30-something letters he'd written me in basic training, tells me that he loves me and he's deploying to Afghanistan next week, wants my address so he can actually send me the letters. The guy is openly weeping. I take the letters, write down my address real quick, and go spend the rest of my lunch in the bathroom as originally planned. I should not have opened those letters. Oh my god, they were graphic. They were not safe for work. They detailed what our children would look like, where we'd live, our careers, our retirement together, and they were all like that. Guess who didn't deploy to Afghanistan after all? Heck, guess who didn't even finish basic training? About a month after that incident, he messaged me on MySpace, apologizing for being a weirdo creep. I wrote back saying something like, "Don't worry about it." Then the next day, when I came home from youth group or wherever I'd been, my mum handed me the phone. "Someone named Greg has been calling for you. He's called here 25 times in the past 2 hours. You might want to call him back." So I did. I told him off, asked him not to contact me anymore. I was pretty angry. Last I heard from him was when I googled my own name and found a MySpace note he had written detailing his intense hatred for me and why I'm a stupid C-word who needs to die and how I need to die and so on. In short, sometimes there's a reason why people don't have any friends. I tried to be nice, ended up the object of a weirdo's obsession. In year 8, before the time of texting, a boy who liked me gave a girl on my bus a letter for me. It was a letter confessing his love for me, written entirely in 50-cent lyrics. The closing line being, "I love you like a fat kid love cake. You know my style, I'll say anything to make you smile." Oh god, this is making me relive all of the horrible cringe stories with people that I had crushes on. What the heck was wrong with me? I'm never going to get to sleep now. What's the big mystery of your childhood that you finally solved years later? I learned that the brown part of the bread doesn't contain the nutrients, it's just the more cooked outer layer. My brother lied to me to get me to eat crust when I was a kid. I have a memory from when I was 6 of an old man cracking jokes with the kids and spitting his dentures into his food. I thought it was hilarious and I knew this man was named Frank. Casually mentioned it to my grandmother. Turns out I was remembering my great-grandfather, and that day was my great-grandmother's funeral. My dad used to occasionally burst out with this one line of a song, "Said Barnacle Bill the Sailor." Only ever that line. When I was 6 or so, I asked him why, and he said it was an old drinking song that was absolutely filthy and I was too young to hear the rest of it. This continued once or twice a year until I was 18. I told him that I was an adult now and he could tell me the rest of the song. I distinctly remember him looking up from the newspaper, sighing and folding it, then going, "The truth is, I can never remember the rest of the song." And then he went right back to reading the newspaper. I mean, your dad wasn't wrong about it being filthy. Barnacle Bill is written in its entirety on Wikipedia. And let me tell you, it is too long and definitely not YouTube appropriate. Not the biggest mystery, but one day my friend was over in my house playing video games. My mum calls us over to her room to help flip the mattress over. So we did. We then went to another friend's house. My mum then calls that friend and says, "There were 2 $20 bills on top of the dresser. Did you take them?" I said no. I asked my friend and he said no as well. Then like 5 minutes later, my friend asks if we want to go to the toy store because he has $40 in 2 $20 bills. I say yes, and we go and he buys me a yo-yo or something. It took me years to finally realize that my friend stole from my family. The entire time I lived in my childhood home, my mum hid my Christmas presents in her secret hiding place. She made it sound mystical and mysterious. A few months ago, a while after I moved out, she finally told me what the secret hiding place actually was. The Christmas tree box in a cabinet in the garage. She'd replaced the Christmas tree with my presents when she put the tree up. Plain sight is always the best strategy. Something that a small part of your brain knows is filled with something else that you don't care about, and it continues to know that, even after the filling has been demonstrably removed in front of your eyes and decorated in the living room. Very cunning. Growing up, I always insisted that I liked the mashed potatoes at my grandma's house better than the ones my mum made. My grandma once told me it's because she uses a special recipe. I found out last year that my mum hand mashes her potatoes and my grandma just gets the Betty Crocker boxed crap. Her special recipe I was going to get when she dies is Betty frickin' Crocker. I remember being about 8 and in the car with my dad. I was in the front seat and we were driving somewhere and this song came on the radio. He cranked it and said something about it being the best guitar playing ever. He really jammed out, which was really uncharacteristic because he was usually so stoic. It was the only time I heard the song, and he died before I could ever ask him what it was. When I asked around, nobody knew what the frick I was talking about or what song I was thinking of. So I had this melody in my head for years, but how do you look up a song that has no lyrics? So for years and years, this song stayed on the back burner of my brain. I was afraid to forget it. Somehow this story pops up when I'm like 26 or so, chatting with my husband, and we searched YouTube for best guitar songs. And after about 15 minutes, we find it. Cliffs of Dover was the song that I'd burned into my brain on repeat for 16 years. And now I jam out to it with my kids. When I was in elementary school, I always wondered what the teacher's staff room was like. It seemed so mysterious, and I remember trying to get a peek anytime I walked by and the door would open. Later I became a teacher, and I can fully confirm that they're dull, often toxic spaces full of cranky teachers complaining about their students. When I was younger, like 4 or 5, my family had a pet turtle. One day the turtle went missing, and my parents told me it had climbed the wall in our backyard and went to the creek behind our house. I, being a naive toddler child, did not question this logic. Fast forward to when I was 17 and driving with my mum in the car, we saw a tortoise crossing the street, and I was suddenly thrown back to my memory of us having a pet turtle. I pulled over to save the tortoise, and I was all like, "Oh my god, Mum, turtles can't climb walls! What happened to our turtle?" I came to find out it had burrowed a hole in our lawn, and my dad hadn't noticed it until he had run it over with a lawnmower. Obviously, it was easier to pick up the pieces and tell your kid it climbed the wall than admit you murdered it with a lawnmower. In short, my parents lied to me about a pet going missing, and I found out it was brutally murdered, by accident, by my father. I kind of have a weird reverse of the question, but I promise it's good. As a kid, my dad would call me from the other side of the house to bring him something to drink from the kitchen. He always drank from a straw, and about first grade I started getting annoyed at this, so I started poking a tiny hole in his straw as my own little vengeance. I didn't come clean about this until I was like 22 years old. The look on his face was priceless. It's like he instantly snapped back to then and knew exactly what I was talking about and just said, "Son of a witch, you did, didn't you?" He just thought we were buying cheap straws. Haha, I have a reverse one also. Mum used to make those Betty Crocker cakes, and I loved eating the batter. I'd eat so much of it that there would be barely any cake left. She was completely perplexed. Finally, she writes a long, angry email to Betty Crocker about what a farce their cake mix is, because it barely makes a cake big enough to eat. They apologized profusely and sent a bunch of free cake mix. I told her in my late 20s, and the look on her face. Oh. I actually solved a family mystery for my mum. I wasn't allowed to play console video games during the week all the way until I was 18. But some nights I'd really be craving it, so I would noiselessly creep through my house into the basement where I could play video games in peace. But once every 30 times or so, one of my parents would need something from the basement, and I'd quickly turn off the TV monitor, hide in the guest room, and pray that they didn't turn on a light or notice the Xbox was on. One night I ducked into the guest room and hid behind the bed. To my horror, my mum followed me into the room and turned on the lights. I was panicking, so when she started digging through the closet with her back to me, I just made a run for it. I nearly brushed her shirt, and if she'd seen me, I'd probably have given her a heart attack. But I made it and kept going all the way to bed. About 5 years went by, and my mum said something like, "You're such a quiet walker." And I told her it was because of my basement trips, thinking I had nothing to lose. My mum's face went kind of solemn when I explained, and she said, "So there really was someone down there." And she explained that she remembered that exact night and the feeling that there was a ghost in the room. Over the next couple of days, she'd stare into space and just say, "I can't believe you were really there." She seemed to get over it, but she probably checks empty rooms a little closer now. I visited my dad when I was 6 or 7 years old at the place where he worked, or so I was told. I remember remarking at the time, and people laughed at me because I said it just looked like a prison. The people laughing were the guards, and I was indeed visiting my dad at Terminal Island Federal Correctional Institution, where he was a federal inmate. Once when I was about 7 or 8, my family was having a pool party, and my 20-something aunt was sitting by the pool with a glass of clear liquid. I was hot and thirsty, so I reached for her drink, and she said, "Don't drink that, it's pool water." I wondered why in the heck she'd have a glass of pool water, but I left it alone. Years later, as my family's alcohol consumption habits became a lot clearer to me, I realized she was probably drinking vodka. My mum used to call us in for dinner by yelling out the back door from the kitchen. I was in middle school before I realized the scream door was actually called a screen door. When I was a kid, my dad bought me one of those big candy cane things filled with jelly beans. I was so excited to eat them, but I was told I had to wait for the next day. I asked for them later, but apparently they disappeared into thin air. I couldn't find my candy cane anywhere. Lots of weird stuff used to happen around our house, like borderline paranormal stuff, and my dad said it was just that. No, it wasn't. That motherfricker ate my frickin' jelly beans. I think the part you skipped over here leaves some questions. You mentioned that paranormal stuff happened in your place all the time, and I wonder just how much was down to your dear old dad, because the jelly beans should have triggered a full-blown interrogation. You know, I'm not sure if this is considered a mystery or not. My mother, who passed in 2009, used to make meatloaf every single year on Groundhog's Day. Every single year. Every single year she'd tell us it was groundhog, and I always thought it just tasted like ground beef. But I was a kid. I'm 33 now. Last year I said something to my brother about it and asked if he knew where my mum got the ground hog. I wanted to do that for my son. My brother had no idea what I was talking about. I told him about it and he started laughing. My wife started laughing, and my own son, who didn't know why, started laughing as well. Mum got me real good, you guys. Mystery solved. It was just regular meatloaf. We grew up poor, and at the age of 10, my friends were all having these crazy birthday parties with petting zoos, bouncing houses, clowns, stuff like that. So my mother, who's a very resourceful woman indeed, decided I would have a sleepover for my 11th birthday. It was great, and we were going to make ice cream cones. So we got all the stuff out with my mum, and my mum opened the box of cones up, and they were all smashed up. She announced that we weren't having regular ice cream, we were having Magic Castle sundaes, because the broken ice cream cones resembled the sections of a castle. We all thought this was great, and we had them. When my friends went home, they asked their parents to make Magic Castle sundaes as well. 2 days ago, I found out that my mother was just getting the past sell-by foods from behind the grocery store. They weren't expired, just past the sell-by date. She had no idea that the cones were broken up until she opened them with us. She thought of the Magic Castle idea quickly, and we all loved it. Just goes to show how stupid kids are. Goes to show how quick-witted she was, and able to make it seem special enough that the other kids wanted it too. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I live and grew up in the Deep South. As a child, from earliest memories until about 8, we'd take a winter trip up to Stowe, Vermont to see the grandparents. I'd have scary nights hearing ghosts wailing outside the windows. It was terrifying. My grandparents moved south and we stopped going. When I was in my 30s, I took another trip up to Vermont. First night stay, I heard the ghosts. Turns out the winter winds up north are way different than the winds of southern nights. Suddenly, my general fear of the dark disappeared as I realized fully what the source of the sound was. When I was really young, me and my siblings would play in my grandparents' yard. My grandfather would tell us to stay away from the skunk hole at the edge of the yard. We lived in South Texas, so this wasn't something out of the ordinary, and we just avoided it like any other animal home. Years later, it dawned on me, it was actually the septic tank access. The reason that my aunt punched her husband at the pool during a huge family vacation. It was because she found out that the long-distance charges to the hotel room they shared had a ton of calls to a woman he was known to think was really swell. I have these massive gaps in my memories as a child, like weirdly inexplicable ones that always felt weird. Not just basic forgetting stuff. I've had a few instances of this happening as an adult as well. Well, it turns out I have a dissociative disorder that can cause amnesia. As a kid, I played Medal of Honor Allied Assault with my brother. We got to the 5th level, which took place in a rainy French city similar to Saving Private Ryan. However, we always got stuck on the first objective, which was to locate the bazooka team. There were no clues as to where this team was in a giant rubble-filled city with poor visibility. To make things worse, hidden enemy snipers would constantly fire at you, making the search much more difficult than it already was. My brother and I practically scoured every nook and cranny, but we never found that team. If the bazooka team was trying to stay hidden, they were doing a very good job. In the months that followed, we reinstalled and replayed the game several times, but we'd always get stuck on that level. Fast forward several years and I got the digital version of Allied Assault for nostalgia's sake. I dreaded playing the 5th level, but to my surprise, I easily cleared the first objective by happening across the corpses of the bazooka team in one of the buildings. Turns out the CD we originally played on was bugged, and the bodies never even rendered into the game. All we did was waste several hours looking for a group of people that never made it to the battle in the first place. Giddy at the prospect of finally completing the game, I happily continued the level only to quit when I kept getting sniped by those damn hidden snipers. When I was 10, my godfather gave me $20 as a Christmas gift. At the end of the dinner, the money had disappeared. For years, my parents blamed me for being irresponsible with my money. Years later, we figured out that after she was caught stealing stuff from my aunt's house, that my cousin's fiancé at the time was a kleptomaniac. Turns out she was the one that stole the money. One evening, when camping, my brother caught a fish that we decided to keep alive in the cooler for some reason. Well, the next morning we ran out to see the fish and it had grown like 5 inches. We were so excited and didn't know how the fish grew that much overnight. Last year we bought it up and my dad said that he'd got up that morning and seen the fish being taken by a raccoon and that he'd spent the next hour or so frantically fishing for another one. He said he caught the new fish, the first one that he was able to catch, just a few minutes before we got up. I'd never questioned that the fish had grown that much as I grew up myself, but after hearing what really happened, I did feel like we probably should have wondered about that more at the time. I have a similar story. When we were young, we got a pair of kittens, a black one, mine, and a grey one, my brother's. They got some vaccines, and some days later we woke up and the grey kitten had grown. Wow, cool. Why didn't my black kitten grow too? Strange, but whatever. Stopped questioning it. Turns out the grey kitten had randomly passed away one night. So my mom sent my dad out to get a new grey kitten so the kids wouldn't be sad. All he could find was a slightly older and bigger grey kitten, so they told us one of his shots had helped the cat grow. I believed that until late high school when my mom came clean. You probably told the story of how shots made one of your kittens grow to a teacher, who was then like, "Oh, honey." Yeah, given how kids like to blabber about the stranger phenomenon in their lives, there is a very good chance that this happened, and some poor teacher did indeed have to keep a straight face despite the knowledge that a kitty had recently died. Sad times. My father used to take us on camping and on hike and bike rides. He taught us about safety in the woods and on the water and how to navigate using maps. So it wasn't all that strange when he said one day, when I was maybe 10, we were doing a game where we'd be blindfolded and taken on a drive. The object of the game was to call out what direction we were turning by feel, and then ultimately, after driving about 30 minutes, give a guess roughly where we were and which direction home was in. He was impressed with how well we did, and we took off the blindfolds and went for a hike. I never really thought much about it. Years later, I realized why we played that game. My dad was in criminal psychology, especially for unspeakable act offenders. He was kidnap-proofing us, but in a light-hearted way so there was no fear or trauma. It's awesome that your dad instilled a sense of direction in you. That said, if I saw someone roll up in a car full of blindfolded kids that they then led into the woods, I'd be pretty concerned that I was witnessing a real-life, "You think you're scared? I'm the one who has to walk out of here alone" kind of moment. When I was 4, I vividly remember getting into my mum's car and her telling me that our cat had died. She told me how she rushed him to the vet and he was shedding fur, something was seriously wrong. Despite her best efforts, he died. I never knew why he died and why it happened so suddenly, but I accepted that it happened. Fast forward about 15 years, I'm home from college for Christmas. On Christmas Eve, I'm out drinking to the store with my dad and uncle. They're talking about the cat my parents got for Christmas one year, the cat mentioned above. My dad says, "Yeah, that thing got too aggressive, so I took it to a farm and gave it away." Normally when the family pet dies, the parents lie to the kid and say it went to a farm upstate somewhere to ease the burden. Not my parents. They told me the horrifying truth even though it wasn't, true. I was watching Star Trek The Next Generation with my dad when somebody told Riker to wash his back. When I asked my father why someone would say that to another person, he said, "So that you can smell someone coming up behind you." It wasn't until years later that I understood how easy it is to hear watch as wash and how committed my dad was to willfully deceiving his children for personal satisfaction. As a PS here, my brother and I were convinced that he spoke Spanish until we were teenagers. He did not. He simply rattled off a string of Taco Bell items as fast as he could. I learned that John Travolta was actually John Travolta, which really made a lot more sense. When I was like 8 or so, I answered our house phone and it was a man who asked to speak to my mum. Didn't ask for her by name and said, "Could I speak to your mom, please?" I asked who it was and he said, "It's Santa Claus." I was so excited and ran to my mum and I was telling all of my friends for days that Santa Claus had called my house. This led me to believe in Santa for a few years longer than most kids normally do. I was heartbroken when I found out that Santa wasn't real. Years and years later, I remembered to ask my mum who had called that day and said they were Santa Claus. It was our reverend, and my mum was a deacon. He had known me for years, so recognized my voice when I answered, and knew what age I was. It had never occurred to me. Not mine, but my husband's story. I hope he doesn't see this because then my cover is blown. He said in middle school there was a time that he'd get pulled out of class to shoot free throws in the gym. Only him. He didn't think this was strange, but didn't understand why he was the only one that got to do that. Turns out his parents told his teachers that he couldn't participate in the life skills class. My dad used to say he could stop the rain for a moment by snapping his fingers. He'd do it in the car when it was pouring. I was so mesmerized, I told all my friends about it well into late elementary school. I've since realized that he'd snap as we drove underneath an overpass. My dad is an ex-Catholic, and every night when he'd tuck me in until I left the house, he'd say, "We love you, God bless you, good night." And I was always wondering why since he stopped going to church so long ago. Fast forward to me being 28 years old and watching an old Bruce Springsteen concert together. One of his favorite artists, Bruce says, "We love you, God bless you, good night," at the end of his set. I turned my head towards my dad and asked if this was why he said that for years to me at night. He laughed and said, "Yeah, I have no original material." Who ate all the cherries in the cherry cake? I was blamed for this for years after someone picked out all of the cherries and ate them during a family Christmas party. 8 years later, my little sister confessed to me that it had been her. The mystery of why my mum never ordered anything for herself and was never hungry when she took my sister and I to eat out. 25 years later, she told us she was really hungry and wanted to eat too, but she only had enough money to feed the two of us. She didn't want us to feel guilty. I love my mum so much. When I was a kid in the 70s, my parents worked in Canada's Arctic, but were from Nova Scotia. I had a pet mouse, Pixie. Pixie died the night before our family flew home to Nova Scotia for summer vacation. It was many, many years later before I realized that probably wasn't a sad coincidence. What's the worst thing you overheard about yourself while pretending to be asleep? I heard something like, "She's too old for this, I'm not going to carry her up to her bed anymore." And that was the last time I was magically transported from the living room couch to my bedroom. Oh, this is so sad. My son is nearly 13 and was 11 when I was last able to pick him up. When I did, I nearly threw my back out and realized this would be the last time I'd be able to carry him. I ended up sitting in his bed crying. I can still carry my daughter, who's 6 at least. In college, I woke up to my roommate's bed creaking. I shot up to see what the heck was going on. I see some woman on her bank with her legs fully spread eagle and my roommate just pile driving it like it was his last day on Earth. Like a good bro, I quickly lay back down and pretended to be asleep. Then she said, in between gasps of air, "Is your roommate awake?" "Nah, he sleeps through anything." Cut to the next morning, I casually get up and turn on my PlayStation 2 and start playing some random game. The roommate's fling, who I now recognize in the light of day, gets up and casually comes over and sits next to me. "Good morning, John." Morning, Rachel." "Did you sleep good last night?" "Yeah, I can sleep through anything." As the last word left my mouth, I immediately realized I'd blown it. She began a huge flurry of slaps at my roommate while cursing at him. He didn't care because he was too busy laughing the whole time. I was a camp counselor. 2 girls very much liked to make hot or not lists. One of them suggested a male counselor was hot, and the other said he was saying mean things about me behind my back, which made him not hot. It hurt to hear that from my campers, but I'm glad they supported me. My mum was having an affair with her fiancé's best friend, who was married, in the same room that I was sleeping in. I was like 10 years old. My mum was driving around town late at night, probably trying to score, and I was asleep in the passenger seat. She stopped at a parking lot, I woke up and pretended to be asleep. This was back when payphones were in convenience store parking lots everywhere in the mid-90s. So there my mum was, on a payphone, begging her boyfriend for more smack. Last I heard, my mum is clean and doing well enough. I haven't talked to her in almost 20 years. It's healthier for me that way. My old roommate's planning to kick me out. I really squandered my advantage. I should have used my secret knowledge to get the drop on them and kick them out first. Haha, yeah, you did have a chance to do some maneuvering there and to go ahead and give the flat's collective notice to the landlord. I mean, that would be annoying for you too, but at least you wouldn't be surprised by it out of nowhere. Also, if you hadn't already had a clue, there are a lot of sad childhood revelations coming up in this video. My mum doing the deed with some random guy on my bottom bunk while I was on the top bunk. I was probably 8 or 9 at the time. I'm talking loud, vocal, crazy whoopee. Looking back, I assume she was either wasted or just didn't give a crap. Can't ask her now because I haven't seen her since I was around 12 or 13. Anyways, just thought I'd share. I overheard that I was dying of meningitis, but jokes on the doctors, I'm still kicking. You ever just live to flex on the haters? My family was staying at a friend's house and had to share a room. My dad comes to bed hammered and says to my mum something along the lines of, "Does it impress you that I'm this drunk and can still perform? I mean, I actually wanted to not be alive anymore for that." "Ugh, no wonder people at school think he's gay," said my stepmom. The person in the bunk bed under me just beating his own equipment like it owed him money. My mum trying to calm my dad down out of, shall we just say, a really dark place. My brother and I had been really bad that day, and when he grounded us, we both told him that we hated him and wanted him to go away. He hadn't done anything wrong, mind you, my brother and I were just a couple of immature little C-words. He walked into our room that night and I pretended to fall asleep. I'm pretty sure he was blackout drunk by this point, which I've never seen and still haven't seen since then. Then he just started these deep, haunting sobs that I'll probably never forget. He stumbled outside and we could hear him begging my mum to let him just end things and sobbing, "All I've wanted in my entire life was to be a better dad than mine." I was only 11 or so, but it fricking destroyed my heart. I think that's the time that I learned that emotional pain can actually physically hurt. I was hunched over in my bed, bawling my eyes out and on the verge of throwing up. I also felt like a butthole for crying over what we said. My brother was thankfully able to sleep through it all. I think about that once every 2 weeks or so, and I always message him to tell him I love him when I do. I hope he forgot about it, but being a dad myself now, I don't think it's ever something you totally forget. It might not hurt like it did in the moment, but I don't think you just kind of let that thing go. Like most heartbreaking things, I suppose. My parents discussing whether or not I was gay and exploring where they went wrong with raising me. Main suggestion was too many hugs. For the record, I'm straight and have done the deed with a bunch of girls. Take that, mum and dad. My friends talking about going into my wallet later and stealing my money, then leaving before I notice. I kicked them out. Before I got divorced, I was laying in bed late, 11 AM or so, on my day off, after a long string of I think 10 or so work days in a row. My ex, who refused to get a job, was in the next room playing a video game, and I heard him say, "That motherfrickin' witch is still sleeping." Ha! The motherfrickin' witch paying all the bills so you can sit on your butt 24/7? Yikes. I'm glad you got out of there. My mum and aunt talking, thinking 10-year-old me was asleep. I heard my aunt say, "Oh, little Jimmy is just so cute," followed by my mum opining, "No, he's actually not very good looking at all." Parents talking about plans for when they were going to do the deed. If memory serves, my dad coming home from work at lunchtime the next day to do it while we kids would be at school. When I got home from school that day, I just couldn't look my parents in the eyes. "Let mommy kiss you." No thanks, mom." My sister's soon-to-be fiancé beating the old salami while saying her name. I guess at least he wasn't saying someone else's name. Not me, but my wife heard her boyfriend doing the deed with her best friend. This was obviously long before we met. My sister got drunk and I heard a loud thud and she blacked out. Two of her friends and my mum and dad were shouting at each other and they were saying to shut up because they didn't want to wake me up. And they were all crying thinking she had kicked the bucket, and I couldn't tell my sister I was happy she didn't die. Now I appreciate seeing her every week. My then stepmom's nephews talking about what they'd do to me in the bedroom if given the chance. Thankfully, the window to the motorhome was slightly open and my dad heard the entire thing. My dad ripped them a new one and that was the end of that, bar one clumsy fumbled attempt one night from one of them. The next day I told him I knew what he tried to do and I'd tell my dad if he didn't stop. He acted like he didn't know what I was talking about, but he never tried again. A year or so after that, they got divorced and I never had to see her or her horrible sons ever again. I was scared of boys for a long time after that. I overheard my dad and stepmom swinging with a couple of their friends. We were at a summer house and they did it in the living room. I felt so uncomfortable eating breakfast the next day. Probably the funniest one was a camping trip with the boys. I have sleep apnea and use a CPAP machine. I overheard a couple of my friends talking about smoking up some Mary J and hotboxing me through the air intake of my CPAP machine. On the other side of the coin, a friend of mine also slept with the CPAP. One night, the dog was sleeping right next to the table where the machine was sitting. The dog ripped a super noxious toot, which would have been fine. My friend should have been safe with his mask on. Were it not for the fact that that toot got sucked up through the air intake, it woke him straight up out of a dead sleep, gagging and gasping for clean air. When I was a wee tot, I pretended to be asleep in the family room so I wouldn't have to actually go to bed, and once my parents were distracted, I could keep watching TV. I then got to hear my dad proposition my mum for couch whoopee. It's been many years, so I don't remember exactly what he said, but it was something along the lines of, "Hop on pop." Oh no. Oh no. I don't think anyone would have blamed you for sitting upright and just pretending to sleepwalk out of the room at that point, unless this was one of those things that you didn't understand at the time and just slowly bloomed into a traumatic memory. Acted asleep while my family were talking amongst themselves about me getting married off to this girl who's educated but 5 years older than me. We're talking about a literal arranged marriage, by the way, not just silly speculation. I was 15. When it was brought up, I outright rejected it because she was figuratively a big sister to me, always looking out for me. Then she got married and divorced after an absolutely horrible domestic situation for a few years. So I actually feel bad about that now. Sleeping over at a friend's house when I was 14, all of us on the floor in the living room. Couldn't sleep. Two of my friends, a guy and a girl, directly next to me started doing freaky things to each other. I was extremely shy and a couple of years younger than them, so I stayed quiet and just hoped that they'd stop. I had to listen to them for an hour while she made weird moaning, squeaky noises and he was singing, in a weird, slightly whispery, singy voice. I believe they were Matchbox 20 songs to her while he did whatever he was doing, and that was the last time I slept over at a friend's house. I wasn't pretending to be asleep per se, but I was well on the way. I was under anesthesia and I was fading in and out. I remember closing my eyes to help things move along. I was in a lot of pain because my appendix had ruptured. This happened years ago, so I can't remember all of the details, unfortunately. I remember being moved over to an operating table, and they told me to take my shirt off, I think. I heard someone go, "What do you think would happen if I poked her belly button right now?" I was an outie prior to having an appendectomy. They went through my belly button, so that's no longer the case. Anyway, someone very quickly responded, "Dude, that is not funny. Remember what happened last time?" It's possible I was starting to dream, but I remember it making me feel a mix of amusement and anxiety. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. On a class trip, I had a girl talk badly about me to the other girls in my room, saying that I was, in her words, a retard and too dumb to stand up for myself. She said the only reason she didn't bully me out of the school was because she needed me to help her with homework. Then my best friend stood up for me. She said that I wasn't dumb and just a bit shy, and then told her to F right off. I love the logic of, she's a retard but I need her to help me with my homework. What a dumb idiot thing to say. Well, I was overhearing my friends going south of the border on each other. I felt left out. My roommate and her friend with benefits having loud, dirty talk bedroom fun. I just had my wisdom teeth out and I think they assumed I was passed out on pain meds. I wish. My mum's boyfriend sloppily trying to F my mum, all while drunk as heck, whilst we're all sharing the same frickin' hotel room. I was 13. When I was around 18 years old, I was supposed to be asleep, but I snuck downstairs to get milk or something. I heard talking going on downstairs, so I stood still and listened. My mum was talking to my brother about how much of a problem I was and how she hated me. She always liked my brother more. I just silently crept back upstairs and cried myself to sleep. Good times. I wasn't pretending to be asleep so much as they assumed I was asleep. My in-laws thought I was still napping after dropping my kid off at school, and they started to talk crap about me. They said I was a terrible mum, that I didn't care about my kids at all, and they'd better buy a cake because I'd rather sleep all day than make him one. It was his birthday and my god, it was only 10 a.m. It doesn't take that long to make and frost a cake. So I cried in my room for 2 hours before they left to buy groceries, by which I mean drink themselves into a stupor, before I got up and made the cake and birthday dinner that my child had asked for. I didn't tell my husband what they said until a week later because I didn't want to ruin his or my child's day. Had a bunk bed in college, and one night my girlfriend and I woke up to my roommate railing some chick on the top bunk. My girlfriend asked me what we should do and I just mumbled, "Just go back to sleep." Because I figured saying something to them at that moment would make things much more awkward. He still doesn't know. You two should have done the deed as well to assert dominance. Oh, my roommate's girlfriend begging for it in the butt, but not in a hot way. So for context, this was freshman year of college and my roommate for it was a nice guy in an incredibly toxic long-distance relationship with his girlfriend. She constantly called him and accused him of cheating. He never actually left the room except to go to class. I assumed she was cheating on him because why else would she constantly assume he was cheating when she had no evidence and he had never done it before? But I never paid attention to the details of the conversations. In fact, I only knew about the cheating accusations because she constantly logged into his Facebook and messaged me pretending to be him, trying to get me to say that he had cheated. Anyway, she visited. They went out on a date night and I went out drinking. I had a fight with the girl I'd been dating, so I went home and went to bed early. I was almost asleep when they came in, making out and all that. I was annoyed, but tried to sleep anyway. They were getting busy and then it got weird. "You can put it in my butt," she said. "Oh God." He was like, "Are you sure?" She says, "Yeah, John did it, so it's only fair. Plus you're smaller, so it will be easy." "Wait, what?" He says, "Yeah, come on." "No, that's super effed up. Why would you say that?" "What the F? I thought we were past that." "Well, mostly, but it felt like unfair to not let you." "I don't want to. I don't even want to have to do that. Just go to sleep." She went on, now in a high-pitched pleading voice, "Please, do me that way. Come on, it's no big deal." I don't want to. It continued back and forth until he finally relented. Then she goes, It's not even hard. Why isn't it hard?" And then they both cried and I finally fell asleep. They dated for another 6 months. Oof. He ended up coming out of the closet, though not until senior year. He's now doing very well and is in a happy, healthy marriage as best as I can tell. Well, that was one heck of a journey, but at least we can be happy with where it ended up. I've had people in bunks above me have what sounded like very disappointing encounters together, and I can tell you that I shouted at them. Some of you really will expose yourselves to scarring and upsetting things rather than saying anything, huh? My walls were thin, I could hear almost everything. My parents argued in what they thought was a quiet voice about divorce. Then my dad says, "You can keep the kid. He annoys the frick out of me." The next week they told me and signed the papers. I don't really miss him much. He was a complete bully and made me miserable. I'd sneak out, but couldn't bring my mum. That was the hardest. I'm sad, but also glad that he's gone. Since I'm an adult, I don't have to see him ever again. I was at my boyfriend's apartment, staying over. His roommate also happened to have some friends who were dating there as well. I was in my boyfriend's room, and they were sleeping in the living room. They were definitely doing the deed. Weirdest part of all of it was these literal banging sounds, like someone was hitting the frickin' wall. The whole time I had to go number one like a motherfricker, but getting to the bathroom involved walking by the living room and I did not want to risk that. When we woke up the next morning, somebody had ripped a chunk out of one of the curtains and the TV remote was snapped in half. To this day, I do not want to know what was going on in there. My grandparents won 10 grand at the casino, and they told all of their children and presumably gave them some of that money except for my dad. My dad's a jerk, so I didn't tell him either. Well, I heard my roommate's one-night stand dismount because apparently, "Your eggplant is hitting my bladder," and she waddled off for a pee before getting back on top. Good times. I was doing an all-nighter with the boys, gaming of course, and I fell asleep at some point playing Minecraft Creative, and I woke up to, "So, how often do you guys tickle your pickles?" Freshman college roommate watching adult movies on his laptop wearing headphones, thrusting against his mattress like there was no tomorrow. When I was like 10 or 11, I visited my dad, and while you were watching a movie, I tried to fall asleep, and I proceeded to hear him do the deed with his girlfriend on the bed that I was trying to sleep on. When I woke up, all I saw was his clothes on the floor. I don't know why I didn't just get up and leave, but at least I fell asleep before it really started. Roommate's boyfriend and his friend came into my room when they thought I was asleep. I was warm and I was sleeping undressed with minimal blanket coverage. I froze and pretended to stay asleep. They proceeded to talk about my body and how it was anyone's type. Also how easy it was to give substances to ladies these days. Oh, and also the friend talked about how easy it would be to steal or sell my boyfriend's boat motor that he'd stored in my room. Yeah, so they were kicked out and my friend became an ex-friend because she was teed off that I'd let my boyfriend kick them out. Dude, just do it. It's not like she'll remember. She's asleep. It's okay to touch her. This happened last night. I noped out of there so frickin' quick. I woke up the second I heard it and pretended to not hear anything. I just went to the kitchen to get water and then called my mum. I was sleeping in my friend's room while she was in the shower. Everything's okay. She understood and is very upset about it. I found out my dad's best friend had died. They'd been friends since they were literally 5 years old. They went to the same schools, stayed best friends for 50 years, and when he became an alcoholic and cut off contact with everybody, my dad still reached out to him multiple times, even though he obviously wasn't ready. He eventually got off the drink, and they became really close again and were calling each other every day. I woke up to the phone ringing and my dad looking at it and immediately saying to my mum, "Oh God, I think he's dead." He knew that she only called when something bad was up, and he had been hospitalized multiple times because of his drinking. I remember saying years ago that I dread to think of the day that his best friend died because I knew it was coming soon because of his past. My dad is old and is the kind of guy who just wants a chat, and I know a lot of the people he talks to don't want to do that. Anyway, I heard it all unfold and pretended to sleep because I just didn't know what to say. I couldn't imagine losing a best friend for that long. I sat in my bed for hours thinking about it, but just laying still. I didn't fully process it until I went to work, and I spent nearly 2 hours crying in the toilets. That was the only time I cried in my entire adult life. My then-boyfriend opening up our bedroom door to show me off to his friends while I was sleeping. It was the middle of summer, so I was lying completely undressed on our bed. He thought I was asleep. Huge fight occurred the next morning, and we were not dating for long after that. What the frick, man? I'm just still so angry about that. You knew I was undressed. My grandma said she never had anything against blacks, but Mexicans, however. This was in a car during a road trip. We are Texans, Trump wasn't president yet, and I was young. She wasn't just hovering over my bed saying racist stuff, though. It's so far been the only racist thing I've ever heard her say. When I was a kid, I used to be scared of monsters or something creeping up on me in my sleep, so I would always ask my dad to check on me before he went to bed. It made me feel more comfortable. One night, I was still awake when I heard him coming up the stairs, and I wasn't supposed to be awake, and knew that I'd get into trouble if he saw me, so I pretended to be asleep. He came into my room and just kind of stared at me for a few seconds, then came up close to my bed, lifted the blanket, broke wind violently under it, turned around and left. It's been at least 15 years and I remember that night vividly. He vehemently denies it to this day, but I know what happened. Policeman. What crime was so cool that you didn't want to arrest the criminal? I had a case in my first year as an officer where a drunk man launched his car off a boat ramp. We approximated that he was going about 50 miles per hour and the car landed in 20 feet of water. Now for the cool part. He swam out, ran 8 miles to his uncle's house and stole his tow truck. He then drove said truck back, swam down and hooked the tow cable to the axle of the car, and proceeded to pull the tow truck into the water as well. We were called on scene and we could only see the headlights and the tip of the hood above the water. He was passed out asleep on the dock next to it. A friend of mine used to be a dealer, and for some reason he spent his money on reptile habitats. Giant glass enclosures connected by tunnels with plant life everywhere, dozens of different reptiles living in a lush green world. When he got busted, the cops were calling other cops to come take a look. Some of them even went to get cameras. This was in the 90s, by the way. They were just so blown away by what they were seeing. Of course, they still arrested him, but in the cops' eyes, he had become a cool reptile guy instead of just another substance dealer that they were arresting. Oh, this one always gets me. In my city, a homeless man was breaking into homes by lockpicking. Nothing unusual with that. However, what he did was brilliant. He'd wait until he knew the times people wouldn't be home, and he'd clean their homes for them. He averaged a week or so per home going unnoticed. The first few homes he was never caught, but signs of a home invasion were reported to us. On the house he did get caught in, he used the defense that he was cleaning a home that he was hired to clean and mistakenly got the house wrong and the door was, quote, left open. He was armed with nothing but a cell phone. He made fake email correspondence to back his claims from a client with a similar address. He was able to, overall, unproven but speculated, stay for upwards of a month in homes. In court, his defense was actually successful in my opinion because the other cases he couldn't be linked to, and he was only prosecuted for the one. Then with his defense, his lawyer only got him 14 days in jail. The guy never took anything outside of food. He'd clean the house, eat, shower, and nap, and then just leave. House cleaning for the price of a pizza? Come on, sign me up for this guy's services. Yeah, I mean, sure, the idea of a homeless man sleeping in my bed is a bit uncomfortable, but if I know that he's using my shower and laundering his own pajamas, and if I think of him as a professional cleaner paid in food and board for his services, maybe I can start to come around to the idea. It's all about how you present your services, folks. My uncle is a cop in Philly. They arrested a guy who one night put up a 20-foot-long, 10-foot-high mosaic mural. Well, Johnson, this has to be the most beautiful F the Police mural written in gigantic male reproductive organs that I've ever seen. Color me impressed. My friend is a police officer in Berlin. He and his colleague were sent to an incident of domestic violence. A guy was beating up his wife, and the neighbors called the police. When they arrived at the scene, they found the son of the wife beating up his stepfather, who was trying to fight back, but was just catching one hit after the other. The son made sure not to hit his stepfather's face, and when asked why later, he said, "I didn't want him to go unconscious. I wanted this to last. Also, that would have been unfair, as he never hit my mom where other people could see her bruises either." A cool dude police guy stopped me for speeding one Christmas day many years ago. I was late for my night shift at work, so I was in a hurry. When he stopped me, I was thinking, oh crap, I'm a big black guy in a BMW with tinted windows. Surely this looks dodgy as hell. I live in the UK. After apologizing, explaining, and showing him my details, he knew that I was legit and not trying to pull a fast one, so he said, "All right then, follow me." And he put his police car light on and helped me speed through the traffic to be at work on time for a night shift. To this day, I see him around and I buy him a beer in the local pub whenever I can. This will probably get buried. My uncle was a state trooper in Oregon and pulled over a group of downhill skateboarders for speeding in a 40 miles per hour zone. Apparently they were clocked going close to 60 miles per hour down a gradual decline, and apparently they were even passing most of the cars. He didn't write them a ticket because he was just flat out impressed that their massive family jewels didn't slow them down. Pretty legendary. We used to have this campus police officer who'd come chill at a picnic table with us while we smoked the electric lettuce. He said he loved the smell and enjoyed being around us while we were getting goofy. That, and we weren't drunks destroying everything in our path like the rest of the students. Come to think of it, my college was liberal as all heck. This was 12 years ago in northeast Pennsylvania. Mary J was essentially legal on my campus, but they really enforced the rules against underage drinking. Makes me think of Harry Redford, also known as Captain Starlight. He was on trial for stealing cattle, but the jury was so impressed with the feat that they found him not guilty. The judge asked the jury to reconsider. The jury came back out and stated, "Not guilty, and he can keep the cattle." The judge was appalled. The government then shut down that district court for 2 years based on the verdict. I'm not a cop, but my dad was. He pulled over the local ice cream truck in my town because the driver failed to stop at the stop sign. While reviewing his papers, he realized the guy's license is expired, and his permits to operate the ice cream truck hadn't been renewed yet that summer. Instead of writing him ticket after ticket and essentially ruining this man's yearly income, he gave him 2 weeks to sort it out. Ice Cream Man got all of his stuff in order, and at the end of the summer dropped off 4 massive boxes of ice cream to our house as a thank you. I've never eaten so many screwballs in my life. My mum once got pulled over by a nice cop around Christmas time for a busted tail light. She was on her way to get it fixed anyway. The officer walked up to her window and told her to pick a hand. She picked one and he gave her a card saying, "Merry Christmas," and left without giving her a ticket or anything. I was a rookie in the early 80s. I was dispatched on a disturbance call, and when I arrived, there was a guy on the ground and a woman was pummeling him with a baseball bat. I ran up and grabbed her, took the bat and handcuffed her. I called an ambulance for the guy, and the woman was crying and saying, "You don't understand. He committed the unspeakable act on me last year." I was a little incredulous, but checked it out, and sure enough, he did have an outstanding warrant for the R word. I had dispatch pull up the report, and you guessed it, she was the victim. The EMTs checked him out, and he was very bruised but not really injured. I took the cuffs off her and slapped them on him, and told her, "Thank you for the assist on the arrest." He went straight to jail, did not pass go, nor collect $200. I'm not a cop, but I've been let go by the cops a number of times when I was a wild youth. First, there were the many times I just walked calmly past the cops busting a house party. They were too busy having fun chasing the kids running or hiding. Another time, I was out joyriding with my friend soon after the 4th of July. We were in a rural area and had some fireworks in the car. We hadn't seen a car for miles, so I had the brilliant idea of Roman candle jousting. I held the candle outside and shot out above and in front of the car, so we'd drive through the sparks. It was great watching all the colorful bursts shower over the windshield. We did 2 candles, and then we decided we'd do 1 more and be done. For that last candle, we passed a dark car on the side of the road for the last round of sparks. Quickly, we realized that the car was following us so fast, so my friend put the pedal down to get away. I think we got up to 70 before the cop lights came on, and we realized we were doomed. We immediately pulled over, of course. In the end, the cops confiscated our fireworks and told us we'd be receiving civil fines in the mail. Those fines never came. Tommy Fitzpatrick. In 1956, he stole a small plane from New Jersey for a bet and then landed it perfectly on the narrow street in front of the bar that he had been drinking at in Manhattan. 2 years later, he did it again for someone that didn't believe he'd done it the first time. I bet the cops that arrested him were very impressed. Heck, he didn't even end up getting that much of a punishment for either crime. The first time ended up being only $100 fine, since the charges were dropped by the owner of the plane, and the second resulted in only 6 months of jail time. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I was pulled over for speeding on my bike once. They seemed quite impressed by my pace when they saw the old bike I was riding on and just gestured me to leave without even stopping. I think how cool or rad this one is rests on whether it was an old motorbike or an old bicycle. Except, can you be arrested for speeding on the latter? I think even if you could, they'd probably just want to pull you over to see how you were doing that. Cool story anyway. Next up, a mega one. In short, tale of an old boyfriend's misspent youth, sticking it to the man and in the process gaining the grudging respect and admiration of the baconator who busted him. I have a cool story about an ex-boyfriend and his crazy cop and criminal camaraderie. He was brilliant but kinda messed up. When he was in his early 20s, he got into crystal, and thar she blew. He ended up homeless, dumpster diving for food and sellable items or whatever else he could get his hands on. One day, he found a set of lockpicks in a little leather case. He immediately hit up the library, and through books and the library's free computers and internet, he set about teaching himself to pick locks. The thing about crystal is, it makes you incredibly single-minded. But this guy was also the type where, if he became interested in something, then he dove deep into full-on obsession. He started spending all of his time with locks. Then he started making keys. I don't know how many of you have had experience hanging around in substance dens, but he was the guy in the corner bent over a Dremel for 2 days straight. Soon, no lock could keep him out. Still, he had his morals somewhat intact at this point, so armed with his new skill, he just decided to go after parking meters. He figured that because said parking was instituted in World War II to pay for the war effort, then never taken offline as promised by the various state powers, he was stealing from the man. He soon branched out to vending machines and coin-operated laundry machines too, though that was later. He'd somehow steal a parking meter, either by bashing it over with a crappy car, then tossing it into the trunk and speeding off, or painstakingly hacksawing the metal pole. Some meters were just locked to the pole, so he'd just pick that lock and make off with the head. He'd then abscond with his prize to a secluded location, usually a flophouse, and set about copying the keyway. Because the meters in our town at the time only had 3 or 4 master keys, he soon had a homemade key to every meter in the city. It was then as simple as rolling up to each meter on a street, opening it, pulling out the cup of change, dumping it into a heavy-duty duffel bag, putting it all back the way he found it and moving on to the next one. He was pulling in $3 to $4 grand every time he went out. He targeted private parking lots too, because to him, they were the worst of the worst. They were also, incidentally, the motherlode because they had larger coins and bills in them. He soon became very popular. He'd pay people to spot or block sightlines and drive him around, and the word got out. He was the man, because when you have several $1,000s every night, you're the life of the party. With this positive attention came the negative, however. One story that comes to mind, there was this up-and-coming substance lord called the Fat Persian. I've changed the nationality for privacy reasons. My ex often scored from this guy. TFP was delighted by the way my ex-boyfriend was Robin Hooding around and sticking it to the man and pulling in fat stacks of money. Dollar signs flashed in TFP's eyes. Or cents, anyway. So, TFP came up with a plan. This particular night finds my ex at a flophouse holding court in the corner with his trusty Dremel. Someone hands him a phone. On the other end is the urgent sotto voice of a girl he knows. A girl who hung out at TFP's place a lot. Get the hell out of there right now. They're on their way for you. You have maybe 5 minutes. Go. Before my ex could ask questions, she had already hung up. He handed back the phone, stuffed his tools into his backpack and quietly deked out the back door, and ran through the backyards to get as far away as possible. 4.8 minutes later, the door was kicked in and men with balaclavas and various weapons stormed the place. It was a multi-level house, stuffed with people in various stages of tweak and nod, so it took a while to get everyone on the floor in one room and realized that my ex was nowhere to be found. Where the F is he? We don't know, he was just here minutes ago, man. A full-blown SWAT-style check of the place ensues. With their plan foiled, my ex-boyfriend's would-be kidnappers and assailants broke some stuff, hit a few terrified bystanders, and then just left. The plan was to abscond with the brain, take him to some dank basement, handcuff him to a radiator or what have you, shoot him up with stuff 24/7 and force him to make keys until he could no longer function. And then, who knows? Dispose of him in some grisly fashion, most likely. Later, when confronted, over the phone if I recall correctly, TFP was like, "Come on, buddy. You can't blame a guy for trying, can you?" No hard feelings, huh? I digress. Stuff was getting real wild. Anyway, the cops, the city, and the private parking companies were also doing the math and realizing that somebody was ferreting into their cash receptacles and getting away scot-free. After numerous arrests, near misses, and run-ins, the Baconators knew who their guy was. It was just a matter of catching him red-handed. The owner of one of the main monopolist private parking companies began staking out his own properties. He parked in his lots overnight every night for a month, waiting and watching. He always managed to be in the wrong place at the wrong time, though. He'd be in one lot while my ex was in another across town monkeying around with his stuff, and so on and so forth. Finally, parking dude caught and apprehended my ex with his hand in the change jar, called the cops and crowed with delight. And then he probably slept the best sleep of his life, or at least since my ex began his reign of terror. The parking dude couldn't deny the ingenuity and straight-up wiliness displayed by my ex, though, and had to hand it to the guy. Same with the cops. One cop in particular, the guy that my ex had the most dealings with, was also gleefully flabbergasted by the pair on this kid. In the interrogation room, you'd have sworn the two were old buddies laughing over beers, reminiscing about the good old days. "So, that night we were chasing you and you disappeared, where the frick did you go? We were totally stymied, it's like you teleported away. Oh, you know that bush besides the house on Street and Avenue? I hid in there till you guys left. No crap, we must have walked past that damn bush 20 times. Oh yeah, I was doking in my Batman underoos for sure. Oh, check this out. This was the meeting I was at a few weeks ago with the mayor, chief of police, and parking commissioner. The mayor goes, "What are we going to do with this kid with the keys?" The parking commish says, "Well, we've already changed the locks on 30% of the meters." And the police chief pulls out a ring with a bunch of janky homemade keys on it, selects a key and holds it up. "You mean these locks?" Commissioner goes, "Oh, well, we've introduced a new virtually pick-proof lock in a few meters. We've only managed to install it on a few meters, but..." Police chief pulls out another key from the ring and holds it up, eyebrow cocked. Parking commissioner goes, "I see." Police chief selects another 3 keys from the ring and fans them out. "Are you going to tell us about these new unbreachable locks now?" Mayor and parking commissioner go in unison, "Ah, crap. Are you going to get this guy or what?" I mean, it was priceless. We were so teed off. We were all certain the parking commissioner was going to get fired along with the rest of us. Oh man, that's so awesome. They ended up becoming friends, especially after my ex got out of the last long stretch of jail during that time and decided to straighten up. When the ex got out, parking dude tracked him down and hired him as a security consultant. When that gig ended, he hired him on as a meter reader. That job was really too hard for him to do from a moral perspective, though. Suddenly, he was working for the man, doing his bidding, and the cognitive dissonance was too much. He stayed clean for about 8 years and regularly met up with the cop for beers or coffee, and they always had a ball reminiscing about the good old, bad old days. This was around the time he and I reconnected. We were street urchins together in our early teens, or my early teens and his late ones. He was 4 years older than me. We got together, I cleaned up from my substance of choice, and we had a happy few years before stuff started going sideways. He's not doing all that well these days, but I've managed to stay clean for 5 years as of yesterday. That's another story though. Let's just say things got spectacularly terrible for both of us before they got better. Well, that was certainly an epic story with the promise of a sequel. You can't really hate this guy for his specific crime, to be honest. What a delightful public menace. And only a menace to the people making an absolute racket off the meters. Well, I'm actually the guy that the cop let go. I was flying down a notoriously steep hill on a neighborhood street on my bicycle. I had the wind at my back and a huge smile on my face as I blew through a stop sign near the bottom. But then a cop goes flying by, all lit up with sirens blaring. Runs up the road of ways past full blast. There are clear streets there. Flips everything off and pulls over to wait for me there. Waved me over when I got to him. "Did you just blow through a stop sign up there?" Yeah, sorry man." "Ah, crap, I was looking for a porch or something." Do you know how fast you were going? I know how much fun I was having. I tried a goofy smile. 64 miles per hour is nearly triple the speed limit. He shook his head. That is so reckless. Starts to lecture me on fines, penalties, and insurance. Heck, a judge might even impose jail time. He thinks for a minute and then continues. You could have killed someone. Pauses a bit. Grins almost imperceptibly. My record on that hill is 57. I went from almost peeing myself to relief in a single heartbeat. I got a pretty good run out at the top, and I think the wind was at my back today. Next time, stop at the intersection. He gets in his car and drives away. I always stop at that intersection. Now. When I was 14, I smoked because I was such a cool guy, you know? Figured my mum didn't know because teenagers are just so sneaky. My mum was dating a cop, and on date night, she left and jokingly said, "No smoking in the house." Well, a few hours later, I went to the apartment quad for a smoke, and my mum and police boyfriend came home early. She yells, "Are you smoking?" And I was a little crap bag, so I was like, "Yeah, you said don't do it in the house." Her boyfriend was like, "Well, technically speaking, he has your parental permission to smoke as long as he doesn't do it inside. So I don't even need to do anything." We did eventually have a talk about the dangers of smoking and all that jazz, which totally didn't take because I was eventually detained by campus police at 16 for smoking on campus during school hours. I got 30 hours of community service. Look up the story of the Barefoot Bandit. Basically, a kid who lived in the woods and evaded the FBI for a good long while. He taught himself to fly planes that he stole through trial and error. By error we mean crashing, and I think the FBI ultimately hired him after catching him in Florida after getting there from his home in Washington state. I've seen cops blind-eye me beating up my pursuers using gauntlets and Goonies-esque anti-bully equipment. What the hell? You know, most cops are super chill if you've got a solid reason for doing what you did. Ice cream lady flipped off my kid and another of the neighbor's kids. They told me, so I went and confronted her. Obviously lying, so I egged the crap out of her car while I was talking to her. She called the cops, one of them came and questioned me about it. I told him I egged her crap and why I did it. He just kinda laughed and asked me to rinse off her windshield. Not all cops are jerks, my dudes. My uncle, who's a police officer, told me of these guys trying some insane skateboarding tricks on some private property. They were also smoking green herb. This one guy was trying to land a crazy trick that he didn't really know about. My uncle told him he had 3 chances to do it, and if he did, he'd let them go with a warning. If not, they'd get fined. The guy lands it on his 3rd try, and they all skate away. This wasn't mine, but a few years ago in Philly, there was this gentleman known as the Swiss Cheese Bandit who'd pull up along young women and ask them to tickle his pickle with a piece of Swiss cheese. With his pickle already out, which is what moves this from just a weird thing to a felony. Well, if I recall correctly, he eventually tried this on a group of female Catholic school students, not knowing that the kids in Philly are absolute savages, and so they promptly chased him down and beat the ever-loving crap out of him until the cops showed up. There were no charges filed against those girls. Good call. I have a story where the cops were raiding a house next to a house party I was at when I was 16. At the house party, people screamed, "Cops!" And I remember walking out with a case of beer and seeing the cops and trying to be sneaky by putting down the beer and walking away. But then within a second, one of the cops yells at me, "Hey kid, you're just gonna leave that case of beer there?" And I'm just dumbfounded like, is this a trick in my head? But I grabbed the case and walked away. I'm assuming the cops had a bigger bust at that house that they were raiding and they didn't give a crap about a teen with beer. I'm now 25 and looking back I'm just like, whoa. McDonald's employees. What secrets of the Golden Arches did you discover there? My first day on the job, I was told to be on the lookout for the elderly gentleman who'd try to sneak around the corner and pour the entire coffee pot into his mug while everyone was too busy to stop him. I caught him in the act almost immediately. Sauces for sandwiches have the craziest dispensers. Ketchup and mustard are in these really rudimentary plastic funnel things that have a paddle in the handle, and when you squeeze it, gravity pushes the right amount of sauce through the holes. Doesn't seem like it would work well, does it? But it does if you apply the proper amount of jiggling. The mac sauce, mayo, and tartar, though, they're basically in cork tubes that get loaded into basically cork guns. You pull the trigger on the handle and a really satisfying ratchety clanking delivers a powerfully saucy surprise for the awaiting buns. Problem is, though, it takes a bit of finesse because if you hit that trigger too hard, you'll blow the bun and a wad of cream right through the condiment station and onto the wall 8 feet away. No joke, the first couple of tartar splurts on a fresh tube came out so hot, I'd fire a shot or two in the trash to avoid premature splatulation of the lunch rush. The first salvo, properly elevated and adjusted for the wind, could clear the whole kitchen and take out the McInfantry on the cash register. Depending on which one you work at, the parking lot is basically a meetup for addicts and dealers and, at least where I was in New Mexico, for people to meet up and do the deed in their cars. As long as they kept their business to the middle of the night and didn't cause any serious problems, we were told to not call the cops or make a fuss, mostly because they'd come in and buy their food after their shenanigans. Soda and mini pies were really popular with the smack addicts. What I later found out was that management was actually told to let it slide by corporate, since everyone higher up was aware of how much money the night crowd brought in. I got to see many deals go down. I'm convinced that I saw at least one arms deal, but of course I'd have no way of verifying that. If you drop any unopened chicken nugget sauce on the ground once, you've got yourself a sauce grenade. Trash compactor can make for some fun explosions too. We had a Volpack of ketchup that needed to be tossed for whatever reason, and somebody didn't realize that that shouldn't go into the compactor. I got back after hearing a bang and a scream. The guy is just caked in ketchup, and it shot up out of the barrel of the manual compactor and painted the wall, ceiling, and bun rack. They have since taken away the Volpacks. For all that I'd never go back to working at that place ever again, I've got to say that these days I really appreciate how precision some of the equipment and supplies were. The sauce guns, the flawlessly packed custom patties and deep fryables, and the compactor. God, I miss crushing things and occasionally getting fun surprises like this. Industrial equipment is cool, folks. Worked there in high school. I found out that if you put the middle of a Big Mac bun in the fryer and then add soft serve and strawberry topping, it tastes just like a funnel cake. Custom creations were the best part of working there. Cheeseburger bun, fried, add the chai latte powder. You got yourself a cinnamon donut, my friend. Former employee here, I found out when making 5 gallons of sweet tea that an entire 4-pound bag of sugar goes in. Sandwiches with a round egg use real cracked eggs. Folded and scrambled come from packaged goods in the freezer or fridge. I also had a manager that insisted more people purchase filet-o-fish when it's raining because they subconsciously associate the watery weather with fish. Anyway, he did some research by poring through sales of filet-o-fish for months and comparing it to weather data for each day. Turns out he found something like a 3% increase on rainy days and was very pleased with himself. The manager voiced his theory one day and the crews all argued with him about it. This went on for a while. He was committed to proving us wrong, so he secretly pulled the sales numbers at work and did the rest on his own time, never breathing a word until he brought his printed report in to shut us all up. He did separate Fridays during Lent and compared those days to each other in anticipation of having holes poked in his research. We still did that anyway, of course. As pointless and imperfect as the research was, it was impressive to see his commitment to giving us the middle finger. My manager used to be on my back all the time for giving out too much sauce. He tried telling me the limit is 1 per meal. I'm based in the UK. Our portions are generally smaller here, but I'd still give out as many sauces as possible, because screw being stingy. The official deodorizing spray, which you use on the bathrooms or the ball pit to make them smell better. It was the most pleasant thing that I've ever smelled in my entire life. Even now, I wish I could smell it again. I learned that if I have time to lean, I have time to clean. You got time to text, you got time to Windex. You got time to flop, you've got time to mop. I know that the second 2 phrases are people joking around, but whoever coined that first phrase has a special spot reserved in hell. Cool story. I worked there in my teens for a couple of years. Actually worked at 2 different locations, so I saw the difference in standards. At one store, there was a guy who always rode his bike to the store every single day to hang out. He was on the spectrum, slow, and McDonald's was his kind of castle. Everybody knew him and he got a lot of free food from the employees. He was a daily part of the shift for us. Anyway, one day he'd had too many root beers. This was a thing he normally did, because he pretended the root beers were real beers and he'd get drunk. Everyone kind of would go along with it because it was funny and he never did anything too wild. Unfortunately, this day he took it a little too far and ended up in the parking lot throwing bottles at cars driving by. So long story short, the guy was arrested and he was banned from that McDonald's for life. I kind of felt bad about it because that McDonald's was his favorite place to be. He had pull through at 3 or 4 on his bike and stay and hang out with his employees until like 8. Every single day. Before that one bottle incident, one of the managers even made his own little parking spot for his bicycle. He was happy as a clam. I think about that guy sometimes. I hope he's found himself a new McDonald's. I worked at McDonald's when they first introduced sweet tea and remember that it was brewed in a large bucket, mixing hot water with a full bag of granulated sugar. It makes me sick to think about it, but I still sometimes crave that disgustingly sweet, tasty garbage. Dehydrated onions. You put them in a metal thing and you just add water. The thing is, they still taste great, but I was shocked and just happy that I didn't have to go cut onions. Man, reading these, I'm wondering why McDonald's is so boring. We don't spit on anything. The stuff that needed to be kept clean is kept clean, although I'll admit if it wasn't required, it would be filthy. The ice cream worked fine, food wasn't undercooked, on occasion it was overcooked, and employing high school kids, of course they're going to make some mistakes, but there was never anything too bad. My time wasn't bad. We kept it clean and nobody I ever knew of tampered with the food. But there were a lot of funny things that happened, so I have a lot of stories. For example, one day we had 10 minutes to close. It was myself off at close, the grill closer, the service closer, and the manager. Grill closer had on a headset, as he was praying nobody else came in, and he was very low on a few things and didn't want to make more right before closing. The guy prided himself on having things done and being out the door within 10 minutes of closing. The bosses loved him because other closers took up to an hour, and that meant paying them for up to another hour. One good thing to know is that our headsets had 2 buttons. One talked to that other headset only, the other one talked to the outside speaker. He had been playing a game where he was trying to make the service worker laugh while she was taking the orders. So you can probably see where this is going. So a driver pulls up to the speaker. He orders a 20-piece nugget bag. The closer is teed off and pushed the talk to other headset button and goes, "Man, frick that stupid frickin' order. Frick!" Except, of course, he hit the wrong button. Needless to say, somebody got a free 20-piece pack and another free meal in the future, and grill members were banned from wearing headsets for a little while afterwards. I worked at McDonald's Australia. Back when we had the old cheeseburger buns, before McDonald's got healthy, we used to scrunch up the buns and deep fry them in the fry vat. Covered them in sugar, and you'd end up with something a little like a donut. I started working at Mackie D's when I was 15. The secret is that it's probably one of the cleanest restaurants in your city. The standardizations and routine practices leave little room for employees to think for themselves. It's a way cleaner restaurant than the $30 to $50 per person place I'd work at later. True, true, and true. Say what you will about the place, but it's about as sanitary as it's possible to be in the food industry. If you let your standards slip, the chances of you getting away with it for long are next to zero, in case you're working out in Nowhereville, abandoned Bama. I worked in one from 2000 to 2005. During this time, they changed the bacon. The new bacon was not as good. During this time, they changed the shake mix. The new shake mix wasn't as good. The shake machine works fine, so long as someone remembers to fill it before it gets too empty and goes into an automatic 90-minute self-clean mode. It also takes a very long time to start up, so if somebody forgets, there's no shakes for 30 minutes. This was never a problem for me. Whenever I did opening shift, I'd kick off the coffee brewing for my team, then start up the shake machine for myself. The chocolate chip cookies and McGriddles taste amazing if you eat them fresh out of the oven. I always made an extra half tray for myself. Not really a secret, but when I'm on wrap, as in wrapping the food, and I get nuggets, I might slip an extra 2 or 3 in because I like the thought of someone getting hype over an extra nug or 2. The Big Mac is just a double cheeseburger with Thousand Island dressing, lettuce, and an extra piece of bread. If you order a double, add lettuce and Big Mac sauce, you get the same thing with less bread and a cheaper price. Okay, I've been made aware that I was inaccurate in my assessment of Big Mac sauce, and have just checked to make sure. In my defense, 20 years back, I'm old, I am positive it was just Thousand Island dressing. The McDonald's that I worked at kept a very clean kitchen and front line. I worked in restaurants that were privately owned, and the food standards, throwing out old food and cleanliness, just weren't the same. I was very surprised with how much Macca's constantly made us clean. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I worked at McD's in high school. This was in the 90s. The store I worked at had incredibly high standards. I was taught proper customer service skills, how to de-escalate a situation, time management, cleaning skills, people skills, and so much more. I thrived there because I was lacking adult role models anywhere else in my life. My managers made sure I was caught up on my homework, helped me study, made sure I was eating, because even though it was fast food, it was better than no food. I made some of the best friends I've ever had, and I'm still friends with them to this day. I can truthfully say that working there saved my life in high school. McD's has a very thorough training program for managers. I was fast-tracked to management, and at 18 they put me through Hamburger University, the McDonald's training site in Illinois. That was quite an experience. I ended up leaving McD's at 19 to go be a young adult and try new jobs. I don't have any trade secrets to share so much, so I'll just say this. Don't knock the kids or people working fast food. Don't make fun of them or laugh at them or make them feel bad. They're learning valuable skills that will serve them later in life. They're doing what they can to earn money. They're serving you the junk food you want while learning how to grow up to be a successful adult. Sure, not everyone fits that description, but more people do than you think. 10-to-1 burger patties. Every 10-to-1 is 1/10 of a pound of beef. These go in most of the smaller burgers. A McDouble and a Big Mac have the same amount of beef in them. The difference between them is the Mac sauce instead of ketchup and mustard, the middle bun, sesame seeds, and lettuce. The difference between a double cheeseburger and a McDouble is 1 slice of cheese. McRibs are the messiest sandwich we had to make. In addition to cooking it, the McRibs stewed in their sauce in the universal heating cabinet until used. That required a special pair of tongs because it was pork, and cross-contamination applies to religious stuff as well. No matter how careful you were, you always made a mess. Burrito mix came pre-cooked and frozen. You wrapped a slice of cheese with the stuff, and it was put in a queuing oven, which was a glorified microwave until hot. That's it. No real cooking done. Breakfast breads were the easiest back-end position during breakfast. Things just took time. McGriddle buns were baked and frozen, and then thrown into the queuing oven to make them soft. Biscuits were queued and then baked. Bagels and muffins were toasted. McDonald's uses beef fat, if I recall correctly, for their fryers. When the oil was new, it was literally white until it got hot. A patch of sweet tea took 5 pounds of sugar for 5 gallons of tea. You could feel the cavities as you made it. The grilled chicken took the longest to cook and was kind of a pain in the butt. Some of the pieces of chicken could be in the universal heating cabinet for hours before finally being tossed. And that's all I've got for now. I can never forget working breakfast. Those sandwiches need to be cheese, then meat, then egg. If the cheese is next to the egg, it makes the egg slip out. If you want a good replacement for Big Mac sauce, 3 big tablespoons of good quality mayo, about a single good tablespoon of ketchup, 2 teaspoons of gherkin relish, 1 tablespoon or so of pickle juice, 1 teaspoon of garlic powder, half to 1 teaspoon of turmeric, mix till thoroughly combined, and leave in the fridge to let the ingredients make friends with one another overnight. I worked at McDonald's in high school for a couple of months before going to Burger King. McDonald's had more stuff to make things faster, like the cool ketchup and mustard dispensers and the fry dispenser. I liked working at both places though. Mostly kids my age, I had a blast making $5.15 an hour. A couple of Mormon missionary guys came in one time and ordered their food. They also ordered French fries with no salt, so the fries had to be fried specially with no salt. They told me it was their tactic to get hot fries. There are 2 sorts of missionaries, the hopeful, fresh-faced, idealistic ones, and the ones who are actually good at converting people, or as I call them, the con artists. Seriously, I've worked in door-to-door sales, and there's very little difference between a good missionary and a good door-to-door salesman. And wouldn't you know it, these con artist missionaries are really good at getting what they want in a variety of situations, including getting hot fries, I guess. At time of writing, there's a glitch in the McDonald's app. There's a deals section, and it usually has a coupon for a free cookie or free apple pie with any order. Add it to your order, and you get the free cookie. Then, the next time you order from the app, just reorder your last meal, and you can add or subtract whatever you want, but the free cookie should still be there. The glitch is that you can add another free cookie from the deals section, and now you have 2 free cookies. Evidently, there's no cap to this. I now get 5 free cookies with each order. I've stopped at 5 because I felt that any more than that would be overkill. And now they'll have killed this by the time it goes on the internet. You know, it's an effed up mess of cogs and gears that still has some effed up way of working, said an ex-worker of McDonald's whom I know. All drinks come in as a syrup and are carbonated on the spot, hence why it can taste flat sometimes. There used to be a way to get a discount code for every second that the timer was running on a coupon, but they patched that in 2017. The ice cream machine at my place usually broke down because people mixed up the milkshake bags with blue caps and the ice cream bags with red caps while filling the machine. Mismanagement is surprisingly common, and corporate doesn't give a single crap as long as there's sufficient profit coming in. You know, I don't have much tea to serve, honestly. I worked there for over a year. Everything's cleaned properly, nobody messes with the food, because there's always a manager nearby. The food is rather fresh. While a lot of the stuff is frozen, that doesn't make it bad. Only thing is, the tea is very easy to screw up. It's easy to accidentally leave the spout open and have tea covering the floor. Once we had a bag of coffee break and it got into the ice, and into the tea too, and we didn't realize right away, so some people got some coffee in their tea. When it comes to allergies though, everyone I worked with was very diligent. If somebody had a bad allergy to, like, bread, we'd remove our gloves, wash our hands or arms, put on new gloves and make sure the item was okay. Given that was probably the case because we didn't want a lawsuit. Another secret is how much food McDonald's wastes. We had a bucket to toss the food in, and managers had to count it at the end of the day. It was disgusting to see how much perfectly edible food was being thrown out. Luckily, if your manager was a cool person, you could ask to eat it in the back quickly. This was especially the case with the pies. Frankly, the company was fine. They offered to give you scholarships, paid for you to get your diploma if you didn't have one, always paid above minimum wage, though sometimes barely, and it was easy to get a promotion if you asked and put in the work. That being said, I still hate corporations, and the franchise owners were buttholes who ignored a bunch of stuff. Customers threw their food at me if something was wrong, like not enough salt, and I had minor burns from some of the work. Sometimes I was told I was a massive C-word and I should KMS. The list goes on, and also, you're not allowed to take tips. Order an apple pie and a cup of ice cream and run that SOB through the McFlurry mixer together. You can thank me later. I've never worked in any fast food restaurant, but where I am, McDonald's on your resume, especially as a young blood fixin' to get another job at a young age, was a massive plus. They're regarded as a company that trains their employees very well and don't put up with any BS. So if you've worked there from the age of 16 till 18 or whatever, you're considered pretty damn reliable. The cups of ranch, like the ones for nuggets, are different than the ranch that goes on wraps and sandwiches. I believe that kind is buttermilk. I think most McDonald's have discontinued the wraps though, sadly. Fun fact, I met the love of my life at a McDonald's. We were both teenagers and closed together 5 nights a week. He and I had the best work ethic because we both worked at McDonald's for a few years, so we knew the closing procedures like the back of our hands. Every time I ordered a wrap, he'd make sure to go grab a ranch cup and use that instead. Always told me it was made with extra love. Cute teenage crap like that. Before we knew it, we got an apartment together, months turned into years, we planned our lives together and almost eloped. I couldn't picture myself with any other person, and neither could he. Sadly, he passed away unexpectedly last year. I was heartbroken, obviously, but it forced me to take a good look at my life and change what I didn't like. Now, every time I think of McDonald's, I get flashbacks that take me back to that blissful time. Such good memories. Definitely wasn't the greatest job, but knowing how to do the procedures in a smart way and working with fun people, who also work smarter, not harder, really made it one of my favorite jobs. This isn't really a secret, more of a story. One time someone replaced the chocolate syrup in the shake machine with barbecue sauce on accident because the bottles are similar. I mean, they're labeled differently, but it still happens. We found out because a few people complained that the chocolate shakes were sour. We remade them for a couple of people and they moved on, but one lady just wouldn't let it go. My manager tasted the shake and was like, "What the frick?" and then looked and saw the culprit. We had to clean the line after that, so we didn't have chocolate shakes for a hot second. Fries are delicious when dipped in Big Mac sauce, or with the honey dip for the McNuggets. Get a cheaper burger dressed as a Mac to save money on buying a Big Mac. You can ask them to throw an apple pie into the McFlurry so you now have a pie McFlurry. The big breakfast usually is made with scrambled eggs. You can ask them to be sunny side up as well. If the fries are yellow or brown, the oil hasn't been changed in a long time. If they come out white or very pale yellow, they're made in fresh oil. One pie is the same cost as 2 pies. Always buy 2, because why the F not? You can ask for leaf lettuce instead of the shredded stuff. Sometimes it tastes better on certain sandwiches. The eggs are real. McDonald's is the biggest buyer of chicken and eggs in the world. Tim Hortons eggs are made of powder. Ugh. People would do just about anything to get their hands on the Beanie Baby Happy Meal toys in the late 90s. We had a rule that you had to buy a meal to get the Beanie Babies, so people would come in, order 6 meals, and then throw away the food and leave with the toys. What basic, kid-level fact blew your mind as an adult? I lived in a desert for most of my life. No snow, and before my recent experience, I'd spent maybe a total of 5 days of my life in snow, and the snow I was in was incredibly light. Because of this, I always pictured snow as eternally white and ethereal, like in all of the cartoons that I'd watched as a kid. I went to spend time with my partner's family back in the Midwest in early February. I was absolutely enchanted on my first day of the 2-week stint. And then I watched what happened as the snow stayed around, and I got to see black ice and the nasty grey-brown snow blocks on the side of the road. I suppose I should have known snow got dirty and tracked over and nasty, but I didn't. It robbed the childhood wonder and whimsy right from under my nose. I was baking a cake in my dorm for my 19th birthday. My friends were running around and being loud, so I yelled at them to stop because I didn't want them to ruin the cake. They looked at me like I had 2 heads, so I had to explain that my siblings and I were always taught that making loud noises or running around a kitchen when something was baking would make it fall. I was surprised that they'd never learned that baking rule. Yeah, it turns out that was made up to stop kids from running and being loud for a couple of hours when the baking was being done. I called my mum up to ask her about it, and both she and my grandma were just as shocked as I was to find out it was a myth. So apparently at least 3 generations have believed and followed that rule. My mother used to feed me dark green lettuce as a salad. I loved it when I was a kid. I think I was 17 and I had a friend over for dinner and asked my mum for seconds of dark green lettuce. My friend looks at me like I'm a frickin' idiot. Do you mean that's spinach? What the F? Mums had been fooling me my whole life. In college, my buddy asked me how to spell smorning because his phone didn't recognize it as a word. And then he goes on to say, like the smorning. I ask, do you mean this morning? One day, I had a light bulb moment. Pickling is a process. You can pickle anything. So what are pickles? I was going to blow so many minds with my question. Turns out it's cucumbers. And everyone on the planet knew that except me. One of the unanswered questions of the universe is why cucumbers are special. You've got pickled eggs, pickled herring, pickled pig's feet, but when you pickle cucumbers, you get pickles, not pickled cucumbers. Why? The answer might well be that pickled cucumbers are the only one of those things actually worth eating. Look, the others served their purpose in the pre-refrigerator days, but I'm going to risk the wrath of our English viewers and just say that pickled eggs have no redeeming qualities as a food. Why would you eat them when you have those amazing cold pork pie things in your pubs? I thought robins, like the birds, came out of hibernation at Christmas time because that's when you see them on cards and stuff in the UK. I didn't realize for a very long time that you in fact see them all the time like normal birds. Not me, but my father once stole into the woods during a family camping trip and put marshmallows on a bush so it looked like they grew on it. My sister made it to post-secondary horticulture before she wised up. I always thought the term "the coast is clear" was "the ghost is clear," like as in transparent. My great-grandfather had half a pinky on his left hand and always said it was because he liked to use it to sop up leftover pancake syrup and had worn it down to a nub. This made sense to me because I'd seen him do that plenty of times. I was so embarrassed to be in college before I realized that was ridiculous and finally asked him what really happened. In reality, he and my uncle had been working in their blacksmith shop, and my uncle accidentally brought a sledgehammer down on Granddad's pinky. He just didn't want to traumatize me with the truth as a kid, but by the time I asked, I was more than old enough to handle it. As a kid, I used to think the black market was an actual place like a bazaar where all the criminals would regularly meet up. When I was 4 or 5, my mother had bought me a balloon one day. Plain blue balloon with helium. I accidentally let it go and it flew away. Being little, I was devastated. Later that night, she comes back from somewhere and tells me she was at the gas station and miraculously, my balloon just came floating by. Being a kid, I was thrilled and I totally believed it. So fast forward 20 plus years, I'm on a date and we stop to get gas and we see a balloon floating by the gas station. I probably hadn't thought of that story again in all that time. So I start telling my date the story of how I had a balloon fly away and then my mother found the very same balloon at a gas station, and then as I'm saying it out loud I realize, too late to not look like an idiot, that of course it wasn't the same frickin' balloon. I've never seen someone laugh so hard. I didn't realize the handicap sign was a person in a wheelchair for a long time. I'd always thought it was just a neat little symbol, kind of like a treble clef. I truly believed that for the longest time that hair grew from the ends of the strands, not from the scalp. When I was 13, I asked my friend who had dyed her hair what she was going to do when the ends grew her natural color. I did not hear the end of that. My stupidity still pains me to this day. I learned after the 2016 election that Alaska is not in fact an island with a weirdly straight border. That's just how it looks on the electoral map. For years, I'd been removing toast from the toaster by sticking a butter knife in it and picking it out. It wasn't until I was 20 that my girlfriend freaked out when I started doing it, and I learned that metal in the toaster is bad. I guess I'd been pretty lucky. I thought until about the age of 21 that when companies had est next to their name, it was estimated that companies were started around that year. It was only when I voiced my disgust profoundly to my then partner that it was ridiculous that nobody knew when these companies were formed, and why were they all estimated, that she just stared at me blankly for a moment and said, "Established." The penny dropped real hard just then. I was 23 when I learned I was allergic to apples. Somebody was complaining about their throat closing up after smoking, and I responded with, "Oh yeah, like when you eat an apple." You can imagine how the conversation went from there. A friend of mine learned he was allergic to bananas when his mum asked why he didn't want one, and he just said he wasn't in the mood for a spicy fruit. We were at least teenagers. That little thing that dangles at the back of your throat isn't your tonsils. Depends on what you consider a child fact, I suppose, but in my mid-20s I moved up the food chain from server to bartender at the restaurant I worked at. Someone ordered a Roman Coke. I didn't know what was in a Roman Coke, so I told him so, but that I'd figure it out. I figured out that what I'd been understanding as a Roman Coke my whole drinking life was in fact a rum and coke, and that I knew how to make that. I didn't learn that Martin Luther and Martin Luther King Jr. weren't the same person until college. I'm from Pennsylvania. When they do the nightly lottery drawings on TV, they always add a reminder at the end. Benefits older Pennsylvanians every day. So naturally, I just assumed that a lot of elderly people won the lottery. When I was a teen, I made a joke to my dad about him turning 50 and having a better shot at winning the lottery, and he looked at me like I was nuts. Turns out that benefits older Pennsylvanians every day means the lottery is a fundraiser for senior services, and here I was thinking that it meant Grandma was winning millions on her scratch-offs. I'm like 70% sure that there are a lot of people who might have drawn the same conclusion as you about their state or country lotteries. And I've just honestly never thought about it, but I think given that more old people play those things, as far as I know, it's one of those ideas that I might have also come around to if I was left to my own devices. My mum used to tell me the car doesn't start if the seatbelts aren't buckled. Didn't know that wasn't a real feature until I was 22. My 31-year-old girlfriend thought islands don't touch the bottom of the ocean. I can confirm this is a thing. I was a kayak, surf, and snorkel guide in Hawaii, and a staggering amount of people asked me how long it would take to swim under the island. Don't add dish soap to the dishwasher. I found out that one at 26. I swear it's only because I grew up washing dishes by hand. I had a fun time cleaning that mistake. Space heaters are so named because they heat a room, a space, and not because they look like futuristic devices from outer space. I went to Lowe's and I asked in front of everyone for a strap, hold for demonetization, on. The correct word I was looking for was ratchets and tie-downs. It took me an embarrassingly long time before I realized that when a movie had a blurb from Rolling Stone, it wasn't the Rolling Stones reviewing it. I spent well into my teen years thinking it's cool how the Rolling Stones are so influential in music that they have a whole magazine reviewing stuff. Like, I really thought Mick Jagger was just giving his opinion on stuff. My cousin's name. Growing up, we'd always called her Tori. Always that and nothing else. A couple of years ago, well into my 20s, she's visiting and we go to a restaurant. Our waitress comes up and says, "Hi there, my name's Victoria and I'll be taking care of you." And my cousin says, "Oh neat, that's my name too." And I was surprised by that because my dumb self never put together that Tori was short for Victoria. I thought the former leader of North Korea was Kim Jong-II for an embarrassingly long time. I somehow managed to avoid hearing his name said out loud, or written in serif font apparently. They're doing much better now that they're led by Kim Jong from the UN. My mother told me that if you swallowed gum, it would stick to your ribs. I was in my second year of college in an anatomy class when it hit me that this wasn't true. My roommate was 21 when he learned that cows have hair. He thought they were just skin, or that we just, peeled the leather straight off them. I incorrectly said the bryst of it instead of the gist of it. I used that phrase in conversation for years, until when I was nearly 30 I got corrected by a Jehovah's Witness that came to my door and asked me if I ever read the Bible. I smugly replied I got the bryst of it. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. That reindeer are a real animal. When I found out about Father Christmas, I thought that meant reindeer weren't real either. I was very much an adult when I was very confused and excited to see one in real life. In college, I had a tough time trying to convince a friend that yellow dandelion flowers were the same as the white puffballs. I had to find a plant that had both stages coming from the same base. That woodchucks and groundhogs are the same animal. I was somewhere in my 30s. My state called them woodchucks, so I never made the connection when I was younger. I thought an axolotl was a fantasy creature that didn't exist. I mean, you can't blame me, just look up a picture of one and tell me that doesn't look straight out of some fantasy movie. I was only able to see the capital D in the Disney logo a few months ago. I always wondered why it was a backwards G. I'm 29 years old, it wasn't my brightest moment. I always thought the Y was a P, like Disnep. I thought it was some fancy French spelling. I was in my mid-20s when I casually mentioned it to my brother and he nearly choked laughing. At age 22, I learned that kiwis aren't supposed to taste spicy. Turns out I'm just allergic. I thought for the longest time that's why people liked them. When I was young, I found a Doobie Brothers CD at a relative's. I asked my mum what a doobie is, and she said it's a lady's private part and to never say it. I was 17 before I saw someone call a sweet roll of Mary J a doobie. I found out that jackalopes are not real and a creation from taxidermists and other folklore. I was absolutely mind-blown and Scooby-Doo betrayed my younger mind. There's no chemical in the pool that reveals pee. A buddy and I were talking about it and we both realized at the same time that neither of us have actually seen it. We looked it up and felt as dumb as hell. The Adam Sandler movie Grown Ups, or maybe its sequel, uses this premise as a gag. I like to think that will help keep this myth alive for another generation. I was a lifeguard for many years and we absolutely told the kids that pee-revealing chemical is real. My granddad played this epic decades-long practical joke on me. Every Christmas, for as long as I remember, he'd put on Jeff Wayne's War of the Worlds, only the first disc, and said it was a Christmas tradition. Every year, without fail, he'd put the CD on regardless of if we were at his house or if he came to us that year. It was only at Christmas 2020, when I had my first Christmas without seeing any family due to COVID, that I asked my housemate, "Do you want me to stick on the War of the Worlds now or later?" My housemate looked at me perplexed. "What?" "You know, War of the Worlds. My granddad insisted it was a tradition." Only your granddad does that. I told him over video call on Boxing Day, and I have never seen the old man laugh so hard. I mean, it is funny, but I've got to say that it sounds like he actually did turn it into a real tradition in the family. This happened every year on Christmas for, 2 decades? My family have been doing Love Actually for that long, and I'm pretty sure that it counts as a tradition if there have been new generations born into it. Okay, so I grew up on a small farm. We had cows, chickens, pigs, rabbits, and goats, and more. On occasion, we had to shear the goats, and the goats would hold very still when being sheared, like statue still. I saw this on pretty regular occasions. When my parents would take me to get a haircut, they'd tell the barber to give me a billy goat cut. Of course, to me, this meant hold really still, so I did. I had the same barber for a long time. Eventually, he passed when I was in high school, leaving it up to me to find a new barber. Imagine mine and my new barber's surprise when he said, "How do you want it cut?" And I just said I want a normal billy goat cut. This is one of those things that makes me cringe at night. A friend of mine had a mum that would make sure there was an inch of room for his feet to grow whenever he got new shoes as a kid. He was in his 20s and trying on new shoes and asked the salesperson if there was room at the tip. They looked at him like he had a Johnson growing out of his forehead and said, "You don't need room, you're done growing." Oof. I'm from a northern city in the US. In basic training for the army, I was asked by the chow hall lady if I wanted grits with my eggs and bacon at breakfast. I'd literally never seen or heard of them in my life. I lived a relatively sheltered and somewhat ethnic-focused dietary life. I asked her what grits were, and she replied, "Well, they're just grits." So asked, as politely as I could, "Are they an animal, mineral, or vegetable?" Luckily, my new friend from Florida was behind me, heard the entire conversation and said to me, "They're corn, somewhere between cream corn and cornmeal." He then said, "If you put butter and salt on them, they taste like butter and salt." I loved that guy. He's probably a general now. My grandma always made me eat the crust on my bread because
It has the most nutrients.
In college, when I told my younger cousin that in front of my grandma, she laughed and said,
Oh, I only told you that so you wouldn't waste the crust.
Similarly, that if you turn the lights on and off too fast, you'll start a fire. Once I became a parent, I realized it's just a way of stopping kids from being annoying. Once when I was 17, I was losing my mind trying to find cupcake mix in the baking aisle, only to then have the epiphany that cupcakes are just, well, small cakes. That a pony is not a baby horse. I'm 47 and I learned that less than a decade ago. I had to tell my aunt, who's age 60, that cats and dogs can't interbreed and create some sort of hybrid cat dog. She didn't believe me at first, so I had to tell her that there would be a lot of half people, half sheep running around in our country if that were the case. One of my mates from my master's at grad school didn't know that there were male and female chickens. He thought roosters and hens were different breeds. The same went for cows. He justifies hating cheese because he thought cow milk was cow urine. We had to explain to him that pee is not stored in the udders and also asked him what he thought happened when human mothers fed their newborns. Pee is not stored in the chest, mate. We were 24 at the time. Tim, if you're reading this, you were way smarter than me at neuro-ophthalmology. I had my CPA license before I realized pickles are actually cucumbers. Why there are no number 10 birthday candles in stores. I was complaining about it with my husband and he said, you're supposed to put a 1 and a 0 together. And that was the lowest point in my entire life. Coral is an animal. I always thought it was just an undersea plant, or the son of Rick Grimes. Okay, here goes. I'm almost a senior citizen, but a couple of weeks ago I learned that they actually laid cable across the Atlantic for telegraph. I was in tears when my hubby told me because I thought he was joking with me when he said they laid cable for telegraph. I said, no they didn't, that's impossible. But he was not joking and cable was put between the continents. Then I got very upset because I was never taught that in school. My grandpa used to take me fishing a lot as a child. He explained that any noise at all would scare the fish in the lake and ruin fishing for everyone there for hours. On a boat with my husband last month at the age of 28. My husband turned on the radio while we were fishing. When I complained, he said, "Oh honey, Grandpa just wanted you to shut up." I realized Grandpa just wanted some peace and quiet. The song I Saw Mummy Kissing Santa Claus is not about creepy infidelity, but rather hinges on the fact that dads sometimes dress up as Santa, which I realized in my 20s when I brought it up with my Catholic roommate. I'm Jewish, so there's no pretense as to who gives you a pair of socks on the 8th night of Hanukkah. The little pig going wee 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 all the way home was squealing and not peeing. I was in my 20s before I heard someone say it while squealing with their wee, and I did a shocked Pikachu face. I had a friend who at 25 found out that pepperoni was indeed not a vegetable. He ordered a meat lover's supreme. The waitress was both surprised and amused when responding to his concerns about why pepperoni was on his meat-only pizza. I'm trying to imagine both A, what the hell his tongue tells his brain pepperoni tastes like, and B, what the heck he thought a pepperoni looked like in its natural state. Howdy is short for how do you do. Well, color the narrator educated. However, I don't feel especially stupid about this one. It's definitely been sanded down a lot over the centuries. I wonder if someone made a conscious choice or if it was just faster and less pronounced repetitions of how do you do. I guess you do hear some people say howdy doody sometimes, don't you? Interesting. That no, a scientist doesn't actually know everything about every subject in school. I used to think that they were the masters of the world, knowing everything mankind ever learned. I also thought you needed to be a scientist to be president, but oh well. The world would probably be better if that was true. My mum used to tell me that putting too much vinegar on your chips makes your blood dry up, so I've been scared of putting too much on. I'm 25 now and I've just realized that my mum wanted me to save everything due to her being a single mum and in a lot of debt. That Apollo 13 was an actual event and not just a movie starring Tom Hanks. Would have been embarrassing in any context, but all the more so when I was working with Captain James Lovell and asked him why he was signing new paperbacks of Apollo 13 with Tom Hanks on the cover. "Oh, did you work on that movie?" I asked. It was beyond awkward. We had an hour's drive together, and so after he patiently explained that he was on the mission, and as I had not seen the movie, I asked if he would tell me the story. He laughed and agreed. Okay, I've never met anyone who didn't think they already knew the story. Hearing him tell it to me was riveting and special. 25 years later, I still cringe, but it was one of the best days in my life. He's truly an amazing human. What are your Craigslist seller horror stories? I wanted a hamster. I found a post for free hamsters on Craigslist. I called the phone number and asked, "Do you still have any hamsters left?" And the lady replied, "Oh yeah, I just found some." Did I hear that right? I must have misheard that. I arrived at her house and there were several cages filled with hamsters. She wasn't an intentional animal hoarder. She started out with 2 or 3, but one of the hamsters escaped and it was pregnant. They started breeding in her walls like rodents, and every time she'd find one, she'd put it in a cage. When I arrived at her place, there were about 100 hamsters in the walls and under the couch. Her house was infested with hamsters. She was genuinely overwhelmed and had no idea how to take care of the problem. I gave her the phone number for a small animal rescue. They removed all the hamsters. I adopted 2 of them, Peanut and Teeny Bean. Teeny Bean had a massive facial tumor, 1 black eye and 1 white eye. He was born without one and his eyeball socket filled with some kind of gel. The vet said these were cosmetic and he was otherwise fine. He was the ugliest hamster ever and he loved to snuggle. In short, I went to adopt a hamster, and the reason she was giving them away was that her house had a massive hamster infestation. I went to buy a Nintendo 64 with a ton of games and a few controllers for $100. He told me to meet him at a Walmart not far from my school, so I went after the school day. He told me that morning that he had a cherry red Mustang and to meet him at it at 3 o'clock. I pulled into the Walmart and there were about 3 or 4 cop cars around a cherry red Mustang. The guy was sitting on the curb while they took a bunch of crap out of his car. He had like 2 pounds of Mary J on him and some other stuff. I was sad. I really wanted that Nintendo. You should have gone up to the cops and said, "Hey, I think that's the guy who stole my Nintendo. Did you find one in the car? Free Nintendo." I foolishly let a strange guy come into my house to buy a used iPad that I'd advertised on Craigslist for his son. He handed me $40 less in cash than I asked for on my ad, saying it was all the cash he had, and that he figured it was a fair price. When I refused to accept what he offered, he became irate, red in the face, slapped my table with his palm, and said I was being greedy and that everyone selling on Craigslist negotiates their asking price these days. I tried to calm him down by saying that I only had the ad in for 1 day and I'd be glad to call him if he couldn't sell it for my asking price. He angrily decided he still wanted it and left to go to his bank to get the $40, slamming my door behind him so hard that the house shook. As soon as he left, I texted him not to come back because I'd changed my mind about selling the iPad after all. He texted me back apologizing, but I never responded. I felt really relieved when I got him out of my house and also really stupid for allowing him to come in. I mean, most of these stories are about 10 years or older now, but the narrator can confirm that you can still get stories very much like this if you just go on Facebook Marketplace. I swear, half the deals I've had there have been absolutely cartoonish disasters. This video is not sponsored by Facebook Marketplace. My girlfriend and I arranged to buy a couch off a couple in a fairly bad neighborhood. After the hassle of trying to find the place, we get in the apartment, and the couch is in really good condition, and it was retail listed for $1,200, and we were paying $500. They were moving the next day and really needed to sell it. As I was carrying one of the sections of the couch out with the guy, I see a bug scuttle across the couch. The guy flicks it off with a certain quickness, and he looks at me with the most apprehensive stare ever. Long story short, the couch was absolutely infested with roaches. Like, I'm talking thousands inside the couch. And they knew. Since this seems to be a common question, no, I did not keep the couch. I had them cut open the bottom of it and roaches just poured out like a horror movie. I got my money back right there and then and left the couch outside where it belonged. They didn't put up much of a fight about giving me my money back. I love ferrets, and I was in the market for a pair. I owned one when I was younger. I always check Kijiji for people who bought a new pet and ended up over their head. Because I'm worried about these first and foremost. I know that shelter animals are still being fed. I saw the perfect post. Free to a good home. Got daughter ferrets, doesn't like them because they bite. I figured they'd still be trainable, and the pickup was in a nice part of town. I go to the house, and it is a nice big house. So far, so good. The lady invites me in and says the ferrets are downstairs. I get inside, and it's just wall-to-wall toys. Her 10-year-old daughter comes around the corner, and it's unbelievable how similar her daughter looks to Veruca Salt in the original Charlie and the Chocolate Factory movie. It doesn't surprise me how much she acts like the kid in Charlie and the Chocolate Factory at all. She starts screaming and hitting her mum for trying to get rid of the ferrets. The mum doesn't even notice her daughter punching her. And then I notice all the animals in the house. There's like a billion hamster cages. I see from the walk to the front door to the basement. They're all stuffed with bunnies and guinea pigs and hedgehogs and gerbils and hamsters and daggers and chinchillas. It's obvious that this spoilt brat got a pet every time she went to a pet store, and the moron parents just assumed they'd all go in hamster cages and eat pellets. I get to the basement and there's 4 budgies just flying loose, and there's a dog kennel too. The lady said the ferrets were in the dog kennel. There were 5 ferrets there. Apparently they'd bought her the whole litter before figuring out that they were so bitey. She was trying to give me 5 ferrets in a crap-covered dog kennel. None of them were vaccinated for rabies or distemperment. I declined and left the house through the reptile room, full of poor animals without heat lamps, and I immediately called animal services. I can't believe people like that exist. This happened to my friend. He was selling a graphing calculator and arranged to meet the buyer at a shopping center. The buyer wanted to test it out, but it didn't have batteries. My friend agreed to ride to a grocery store with him to pick up the batteries. On the way back to where they originally met, the buyer took the calculator to test it out. He plays with it for a minute, agrees it's in good condition, and passes it back to my friend. On the screen, the buyer had typed, "You are kidnapped." My friend finishes reading this, the buyer locks the doors and speeds up. My friend panics. Then the buyer stops, laughs, gives my friend his money, lets him out and tells him to be more careful. It was almost a Raymond K. Hessel kind of thing, I guess. I went to buy a semi-rare video game, Final Fantasy Tactics, before it became a greatest hit. I met this girl in a Wendy's parking lot, she gave me the CD case, I opened it, and it was empty. I demanded my $20 back, she looked at me and said if I did anything other than leave, she'd lie and say that I attacked her. I pulled out my phone and started to pretend to record her. My cell phone at the time had no camera. She started stumbling around pretending that I'd hit her. After a minute of this silliness, our eyes met and I think she realized how ridiculous this was getting and gave me my money back. These people sicken me. Using the law to extort $20 from you? Frickin' ridiculous. And then the real victims of what she was going to pretend happened get discredited. I went to buy a bunch of rock band gear and the lady tells me that her husband will meet me in a large parking lot. He'll be in a black and white SUV. So I show up and the only car is a highway patrol Suburban. I casually pull up a space away and get out, wondering when the seller is going to show up and wondering if I'd unknowingly done something illegal. Turns out even highway patrol gets bored of their rock band gear. It went as planned, but I did get nervous. 2 of my roommates went to purchase a couch from someone living on the 3rd floor of an apartment building. They paid for the couch, but somewhere between the 2nd and 3rd floor got it stuck so badly in the stairwell that they decided to cut their losses and just leave it there. That person makes a living selling that couch over and over. Nobody can get it down the stairwell. I was selling a small spray skirt for kayaking. Basically, it's a tight rain jacket that bungees around the kayak to keep the water out. I specifically advertised it as small. Anyway, meet up with a guy, he gets out of his truck, and he isn't huge, but he certainly should be looking for an L or XL instead of a men's small. He insists that he can fit into it. Spray skirts don't have zippers or anything, you just pull them over and they can get quite claustrophobic. This guy tries to pull his on, gets like halfway in, realizes he's stuck and he starts to panic. I have to help him take it off. I forgot to mention that this all happened in a busy mall parking lot as well. The guy tries to pull it on, gets like halfway in, realizes he's stuck and he starts to panic. I have to help him take it off. I forget to mention that this all happened in a busy mall parking lot as well. The guy wasn't really angry, but he said he was frustrated that I wasted his time. I mean, I was going to ask if you'd actually put the size on your page, but even if you hadn't, that's a good thing to ask when you're inquiring. And if he wasn't deterred by you just showing the size of it in person and expressing your doubt, it's unlikely he was going to put off by anything as trivial as listed sizes anyway. I was selling a 1996 Dodge Avenger. I hadn't driven it much the past year, and it had been sitting for about 4 months, so I got rid of it before it was a total loss. I put 2 new tires on, front brakes and alignment, a year earlier, so it had a few hundred miles on the tires. I took it for inspection, and the guy informed me that the radiator crossmember, the rear driver's shock mount, and the driver's rocker were just rusted out. It passed, but it would need work. I advertised it for $800. One guy stopped by. He lived nearby. He gave me a story about not having much money and needed a car to get to work. He and his friend took it for a 2-hour test drive. They left the friend's very expensive truck, so I wasn't worried that they weren't coming back. I'd already explained everything I knew to be wrong with the car, and the buyer started pointing out known problems and offered me $250. I haggled him up to $380 as a price. We were to meet in a few days for the transfer. I met him at a trailer sales office nearby, even though I offered to go to AAA because it would be cheaper. He said, I took the car to a mechanic and he said, the problems that I'd already outlined to him, how about I give you $300 instead? I said no, he was already getting it for less than half my asking price, and it was worth that much in scrap anyway. We did the transfer. He had us say it was a gift in exchange for some work so he wouldn't have to pay sales tax, and that it had cost him $200, even though AAA would have charged $75. 3 weeks later, the guy calls me. He claimed that the head gasket was bad and the car had broken down. He wanted to know what I was going to do about that. I said, look, you bought a car off the side of the road for almost nothing. I can't offer anything. If I'd known it had a bad gasket, I would have scrapped it. And then it later occurred to me that if the head gasket had been bad, the mechanic should have found it when he looked over it originally. The buyer hung up, then for the next 3 days he called me 5 times a day. I didn't answer and he didn't leave messages. A week later, I saw the car in a local shopping center lot. It had a dent, so I knew it was mine. The guy was just trying to scam me. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. It was a few weeks before my junior year of college, so this was 2010. I wanted to sell an old couch from my previous house because we were getting 2 new roommates and they already had couches. I posted the ad and 15 minutes later I got an email. The guy said he'd pay $75 for the couch. I'd listed it at $100, but he'd bring some Xbox games to trade to make up the difference. Okay, nice. So he pulls up in a truck with 2 women in the bed. I insist on helping him get the couch outside, but he says no and he has the 2 women do it. And then things get really interesting. He says he only has $50, but if I took the money, he would give me one of the girls for 20 minutes. Keep in mind, he told me this as the couch was sitting in his truck. I didn't know what to say. I took the $50 and said to just leave. He was insulted for some reason and threatened to come back and beat my punk face and rob me blind. We moved to our new house the next day with our new roommates. Fast forward a month, I was reading my school's newspaper, and on the front page was a picture of my old street with the headline, Man arrested intimidating students at a party with a crowbar. My old residence. And I read on. His name was Bruce, and his criminal background included 17 misdemeanors and a dropped unspeakable act and attempted kidnapping charge. Also, just as icing on the cake, he was also wanted in Ohio for numerous stalking charges. Oh, Craigslist. Never again. I bought an Xbox 360 from a Craigslist ad. The kid selling was like 17. We met at a public location, a Starbucks, at my request. I handed him the money, and he handed me the 360. Then he asked me if he could buy me a coffee. I declined. He asked me if I wanted to go out sometime, and I declined and thanked him for the Xbox and left. Well, unfortunately, he had my phone number and email address as I'd responded to his ad. He started sending me these long, angst-filled teenage emails about how he was in love with me and I was his destiny, and texting me dozens of times a day. I used to grow vegetables indoors in my apartment in college, hydroponically. I did not, although no one believes me, grow Mary J. Anyways, I graduated and got a house with plenty of land so I could finally grow outdoors, and I sell my old HPS lamps on Craigslist. The guy who picks it up is your typical 18-year-old wannabe gangster green herb head. And about 4 months later, I see him on the news having been arrested for operating a grow house, less than a quarter mile from a police station and a school. Not Craigslist, but Kijiji, which is the same idea but a different site. A couple of years ago, I was buying some DVDs from a guy. I'd drunk too much the night before and I was having a hellish hangover, but I decided to get the DVDs anyway. He was on the sketchy side of town. Anyway, I pulled up to his house. It's a 5-plex, 5 attached houses, and there's a note on the front door to go to the back. So I go to the back and there are these 3 gangster-looking guys, midday drunk, and some smacked-out girl with her shirt tied up, barely covering her, and in short shorts. They all stop what they're doing and stare at me. Are you selling the DVDs? I ask, sweating beneath my dorky Spider-Man t-shirt. DVDs? Nah, man, don't have any of those. You want some smack? Says the largest one, flexing his muscles. No thanks. What about my girl here? What do you mean? My face is dripping with sweat at this point. You want to take her home? No thanks. I saw this ad on Kijiji. Why not? You think she's ugly? He stands up and looks at me menacingly while I stammer and then says, nah, I'm just messing with you, man. No DVDs. You sure you don't want some smack? No. Okay, I've got to go. See ya. And I turned around and got the heck out of there. Okay, that's the second post with someone just offering somebody else's bedroom favors up. That makes me think there's definitely some sort of common scam to extort or rob these people in the act. Don't accept these sort of offers, kids. Oh yeah, I needed Microsoft Office and I noticed that people sold the program for cheap on Craigslist. One guy 20 minutes away was selling the program for $20. Told me to meet at his house late at night when he got home from work. It ended up being in a sketch dead-end street, and he told me to come to his garage, where he and a couple of his buddies were smoking inside. This was my first, "this is kinda weird" moment. After I took my laptop out and started putting it on the table, one of his buddies tried to close the garage door on me. I realized what was happening, so I tried to grab the laptop and hit the sensors to leave. The guy tried to grab the laptop same time, and I ended up being in quite a tug of war with him. I let go and hit the sensors and decided to just leave and call the cops. They hid the laptop, but I was able to use the Find My iPhone app, which finds laptops too, and got it back. I don't know how the guy thought he'd get away with it. I was looking to buy a motorcycle a while back. I found the one I wanted on a post on Craigslist late one night after work at about 9 p.m. I emailed the seller and he was still online, and he said I could still go and see it if I came soon. So I went and saw the guy to take a test ride. As any responsible seller would do, he asked for cash in hand before he gave me the keys. And he asked to see my license to make sure I had an M endorsement, otherwise I wasn't getting the thing. So everything was good. I told him I'd be back the next day and we could hammer out all the details, the title, the bill of sale and stuff. Well, the next day the guy says he can't meet, he's getting called into work. I'm sad, but no big deal. If he's still interested in selling, I can wait a day. The next morning at about 9 a.m., he calls and says, oh hey man, I'm going to be in the area today, would you just want me to bring the bike by? And I'm stoked. That means I don't have to call my insurance before I can ride it home legally. We continued talking and I said, hey, don't you need my address? After thinking about it for a moment, he said, nah, I remember it from when you showed me your license. Well, that's a little odd. So he shows up at my house with the bike at about 10 a.m., 2 days after I'd gone to look at it. The guy is being real nice and we're chatting about motorcycles, and then he says he forgot the title at his house. He'll go back for it. His wife followed him in his truck. He'll get it and then we'll do a bill of sale. I figured that would be fine. I offered to go ahead and give him the money. Bad idea, I know, I was 19. And he says, well man, why don't you give me half of it? That's $2,000, and I'll get the rest when I get back with the title. It seems pretty fair, so I let him go. So I go wait patiently inside as the guy goes to retrieve the title. He isn't back within the hour as he said he'd be. He probably got sidetracked. I wait another hour, and I'm getting nervous. So I call him. No answer. I wait another hour, and I'm getting really creeped out. The guy just left his motorcycle here. Why? And then things get really weird. 2 police officers show up at the house I'm renting. They bang on my door. I answer, dumbfounded. Is that your motorcycle in the driveway, sir? They ask, and I start to explain the situation. After telling them that the guy will be back soon with the title, they say, well, sir, this bike was reported stolen 2 days ago. The person who reported it stolen said he drove by here and saw it and he called us right away. Did you steal this motorcycle? And I'm freaking out. No, I didn't steal it. I tell them again what the situation is. I give them the guy's phone number. He doesn't answer them either. They call another officer to my house. As they're waiting on backup and getting my information, they say, we have recorded video from the owner of someone getting on this bike and riding away late Sunday evening. Do you know anything about that? I say I don't and then say, well, I went and I test rode this Sunday night, but the owner was there. I can give you his address. And they seem interested. I give them the address. They talk amongst themselves for a moment as I'm sitting on my front stairs. They come back to me and say, sir, the address you gave us belongs to the original owner of the motorcycle who reported it stolen. And it begins to make sense. I'm being framed for a theft. I ask if I can see the video of the bike being stolen, and they say that I can if I come down to the station with them. So I go, no handcuffs, but I am in the back of a police cruiser. I ask the cop who's driving if he can get the guy who reported it stolen to come down too. They say that the guy just isn't answering his phone. I ask if it was the phone number I gave them, and they say no. The guy must have had a burner phone or something. So I get to the precinct, I get taken to this cop's desk. He asks me a few questions and then asks me to watch the video. It's on a CD. He pulls it up, and sure enough, it's me getting on the guy's bike. But the guy isn't in the frame. It was then that it really became clear to me how detailed this whole facade was. The guy had the bike around the back of the house, but we spoke around the front, and I parked my car around front. The bike had the keys in it already. When I bought the bike back, I left it around the front of the house per the guy's request. Because of this, the video showed me getting on the bike at 10 p.m. with the keys in the ignition, pulling it out and seemingly never bringing it back. He even managed to stay out of frame, and aside from a couple of glances in his direction, I don't seem to be interacting with anyone off camera. I'm really screwed here. So my answer is already really long, but I'll sum it up. After spending the entire day at the local police station, the guy shows up and starts asking if I'm the guy who stole his bike. The situation got worse for me until the police managed to make the guy slip up. He just couldn't keep his story straight. He breaks down and admits that he made it all up. He needed the money to pay some bills, but he couldn't bear to sell his bike. So he set up a plan to make an insurance claim for someone stealing his motorcycle, and then created a plan to keep the bike, get some money from a buyer who'd be framed as a thief, and all would end well for him. Except it didn't. I think he ended up going to prison. I'm not sure. I got my money back and I put the whole ordeal behind me. So there, that's my creepy Craigslist story. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all the stories, or if you want some vibey music to put on in the background, check out easymode. If you like Am I the Genius, give Am I the Jerk a shot. Everything linked in the description.